SIRCAA Archive, Section PZ8606. On April 26, 1986, an accident occurred at the fourth reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. There was a large-scale contamination of the territory with radioactive substances. All residents were evacuated and the Chernobyl exclusion zone was created. After the construction of the shelter facility, better known as the sarcophagus, the radiation background dropped significantly, which made it possible to turn the exclusion zone into a testing ground for a whole series of experiments. Therefore, in 1987, the construction of X laboratories began there. The lack of population and the presence of an energy source in the form of the 3 surviving CNPP reactors only contributed to this. 1992, teams of scientists began work in 3 fields: research into the noosphere and Psi radiation, decontamination of nuclide-contaminated lands and reducing the impact of radiation on human health, as well as the development of new weapons and the Universal Soldier program. In 1995, an experiment was conducted to confirm the existence of the noosphere. The idea was to influence an object on the Earth's other hemisphere through an omnidirectional Psi field. A signal was sent from a research ship near the CNPP to another ship in the Caribbean Sea. In addition to the successful transmission of the signal, this experiment resulted in the formation of an alpha artifact on one of the ships. This was called the first Caribbean experiment. In 1998, it was decided to build a Psi installation under the sarcophagus of the fourth reactor, powered by an alpha artifact. So the X-19 laboratory was located in the station itself, which controlled the installation and later received the name Monolith. In 2001, after a successful experiment on reconfiguring the components of the Duga radar, on the initiative of scientists Lebedev and Kaimanov, the construction of the antennas of the Rainbow Aggression Suppressor began. It was used to control the creatures created during the work on the Universal Soldier project: controllers, bureaus, pseudo-giants, and chimeras. See SIRCAA Archive, Section MZ number 3. Later, this complex would become known among stalkers as the Brain Scorcher. At the same time, item number 62 was chosen as the most promising weapon project. All other work on the production of weapons was stopped. The scientific and production base was moved to the former Jupiter plant in the vicinity of Pripyat. In 2006, Dr. Valentin Dalin convinced some of his colleagues of the possibility of connecting to the noosphere and removing all negative properties from the Psi field of humanity, stopping wars and creating a brighter future. The group of scientists who agreed to take part in the experiment called themselves Sea Consciousness. Case File Materials Number 1, seized from a scientist of the Alpha Group.
It exists. What was recently considered a marginal idea in scientific circles has been proven in practice. We were able to prove the existence of the noosphere. Professor Kalancha should be given the credit. He was able to configure the ship's equipment in such a way that all our test specimens received and executed commands with accuracy down to the smallest detail. Dalin, the cunning rat, initially doubted the correctness of our method, and now he's trying to convince everyone that it was he who gave Kaimanov the idea of the signal repeaters. While reviewing the tau wave measurement report at the 10th minute, 14th second of the transmission, a strong jump was detected, after which a significant drop in the signal quality occurred. According to the data transmitted by the team of the research vessel, antenna number 4 was significantly damaged by an incomprehensible formation that appeared out of nowhere at the device's receiver. The team is already waiting for a more detailed study.
SIRCAA Archive, Section PZ0406. After proving the existence of the noosphere, some kind of information shell around the planet connecting all intelligent beings, A group of scientists called C Consciousness set the goal of establishing contact with it in order to create an ideal world by removing information about human flaws from the noosphere. First, the scientists began an experiment with a simple connection to test the possibility of influencing it. Since one consciousness does not have enough power to interact with the noosphere, the project participants combined their minds into a single structure using the Octa capsules. On June 10, 2006, the experiment went out of control. A breakdown led to the release of enormous energy from the noosphere, which fell onto Earth, distorting the reality around it. The phenomenon resembled a burning stream of light from the sky, and later an earthquake began. Most of the military personnel guarding the perimeter of the then regular Chernobyl exclusion zone, as well as a significant portion of the people on the territory, died instantly. Government forces surrounded the newly formed zone and began sending reconnaissance groups inside. None of them achieved their goal, since the information received from the reconnaissance groups was contradictory and implausible. Survivors' stories about incredible natural anomalies and bizarre creatures with supernatural abilities were recorded. Case File Materials Number 2, from an excerpt of the interrogation report of a detained stalker.
According to the detainee, it was established that on the first day of illegal entry into the territory of the Chernobyl Anomalous Zone, he overcame engineering barriers in the form of barbed wire. While moving, he almost ran into an anomalous formation of unknown type, as a result of which, his personal flask was torn from his backpack and thrown onto a tree branch. The detainee notes that the damage was limited to the loss of equipment. He did not receive any physical injuries. He further reports that in an abandoned residential building, he discovered an artifact of unknown origin, which by its external appearance looked like a deformed, melted, and refrozen wood. According to the detainee, the radiation level in the room was high, but the dosimeter readings displayed 0 directly next to the artifact. On the second day of his stay in the zone, the detainee decided to spend the night in one of the abandoned houses, motivated by his reluctance to move around in the dark due to the risk of falling into anomalies. At night, according to him, he heard unusual sounds, which he interpreted as voices of the former residents of their house, their conversations and quarrels. In the morning, the detainee noticed a change in the location of interior items. In particular, a bench, which according to him, had been under a window the day before, and was near the stove in the morning. In the evening of the second day, while again overcoming the barbed wire from coming out of the anomalous zone, he was discovered and detained by a military patrol. All things that pose a radiation threat or scientific interest were seized from the detainee and handed over to the scientist for further research.
SIRCAA Archive, Section PZ0606. In the first days after the second disaster, the Regulatory Board of Project X made an urgent decision to evacuate everything of value and destroy what could not be taken out. Special Evacuation Units, SEU, were quickly formed from the military. They were immediately sent to the approximate coordinates of scientific objects with the index X. Some were informed about the existence of the monorail, an underground transport system that allowed them to bypass some of the anomalies. Other units were given helicopters, armored personal carriers, and trucks. Almost all of them were destroyed immediately after entering the newly formed Anomalous Zone. On June 15, 2006, one of the units, which was moving along the monorail to X-19, reached the complex with the order to evacuate the research results. Having broken through the resistance of mutants, they were able to reach the goal and seize part of the research results. On June 16, 2006, the unit partially evacuated the documents from X-19 and retreated. The withdrawal was difficult, only 2 soldiers survived. The tunnel through which they were supposed to leave the zone turned out to be blocked. Most of the evacuation operations were not successful. The units suffered heavy losses of personnel, and there were cases of desertion. In the end, the program of the Special Evacuation Units was shelved. The zone was recognized as the most dangerous place on the planet. Most of the research materials conducted inside were written off as irretrievably lost. Case file materials number 3, found in the belongings of a member of the Special Evacuation Units.
Day 1. We are moving deep into the Chernobyl zone. Incomprehensible formations are scattered throughout the territory. Some are visible to the naked eye, some are not. Because of them, we had to dismount and move on our own 2 feet. The first car in the column drove into one of these anomalies. First, the cabin was crushed, as if it had driven into a pillar, and then it was thrown several meters to the side, as if it had run into a huge landmine. No one from the crew survived. They were twisted like mincemeat inside. Day 2. While we were resting in one of the awakened villages, we were attacked by some incomprehensible entity. A transparent formation that threw everything that was no heavier than 5 kilograms at us. Unfortunately for Semenov, it grabbed an axe from the haystack and threw it at his head. 2 more were also injured when the chairs and some other metallic farm equipment flew into them. We had to retreat. The captain mumbles something about the fact that we have to complete the task, but this is only the beginning, so what awaits us at the end? Day 10. I am alone. Everyone died. Only Travis survived, but he escaped. When you approached to the captain's point, some giant shit grabbed him with his foot and simply crushed him. He didn't react to my shot, so Terrell and I retreated. This snake to the map, and now I have no idea where I am. Only 1 magazine left. I should have at least taken the captain's backpack.
SIRCAA Archive, Section MS-1011. Summer 2011. A group of stalkers, which included Strelok, Fong and Ghost, reached the territory of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in order to solve the mystery of the zone's origin. They managed to bypass the anomalies and patrols of the Monolith and penetrate the sarcophagus. In the depths of the facility, they came across a massive locked door that could not be broken or blown up by conventional means. Fong volunteered to assemble a decoder and went to the garbage to get the necessary components from the diggers. While trying to leave the dangerous CNPP area, Strelok was seriously injured, reducing the group's mobility. Fong and Ghost carried Strelok to the doctor, risking their own lives. The doctor managed to save Strelok. Having recovered, the latter set off for the north of the zone, where he received new serious injuries in a battle with mutants, and returned to the doctor for help. During this trip, Strelok found an artifact with mysterious properties that no one had ever seen in the zone before. August 2011. During another trip to the center of the zone, Strelok disappeared after trying to break into the sarcophagus, fighting his way through the ranks of the Monolith and Clear Sky fighters. Case file materials number 4, found among Strelok's voice diaries.
I've never seen one like this before. I still don't fully understand its essence, but I feel that this artifact should be kept for myself, and not taken to another trader. Fang and Ghost suddenly changed their attitude towards me. I became the leader, and it seems to me that it's not because I found this artifact, but because I own it. The doctor somehow wasn't very happy about my find. The old man began to study it and mumbled something about its suspicious psi effect. He doesn't like anything he can't explain. He'd better train and treat his monsters. I found it. I was already afraid that someone had cleared out my stash. I shouldn't have hidden it. It could be useful. Now, I won't give it to anyone. I know what the zone needs, and it will help achieve its goal.
SIRCAA Archive, Section CN 1108. On August 9, 2011, the Great Emission occurred, which was caused by the first raid of the Strelok. The blowout reshaped the entire zone. Previously inaccessible territories became open, while at the same time blocking roads familiar to stalkers with anomalies. Access to the army warehouses, the Red Forest, and Limansk became available. All factions sought to be the first to establish control over new territories. These events later became known as the Faction Wars. One of the fronts of this war was the confrontation between the stalkers of the Cordon, led by Father Valerian, and the bandits from Garbage, united by a criminal nicknamed Yoga. The neutrals acted so successfully that they were able to defend themselves even from the attempts of the military to seize control of the Cordon. Another important moment of the faction wars was the confrontation between duty and freedom, as a result of which duty's bases were moved to the Rostock factory, and freedom occupied the army warehouses, kicking out the military from them. Later, General Krylov, who was in command of duty at the time, transferred the Agroprom Research Institute under the control of the military. The bandits established themselves at the former Freedom base at the factory. The final battle took place in Limansk for control of the city. Freedomers, duty fighters, mercenaries, and even bandits participated in attempts to take out the Monolith from there and gain a foothold at the location. Case File Materials Number 5, recorded in Sidorovich's bunker.
I'll tell you something about influence, boy. It was the summer of 2011. The zone was boiling then. Everyone was pulling the blanket over themselves, and later they would call this the faction wars. And I, as always, sat at the cordon and counted not only the loot, but also influence. Because in the zone, whoever has influence lives longer. And here he appeared, Father Valerian. An old fox, a horse from the hill. All so correct, except for the order. He walks around without a halo. It's disgusting to look at. He goes around preaching sermons about the Stalker Brotherhood, gathers guys around him, like the shepherd for a flock. And stalkers are simple men. Whoever speaks louder and looks confident, they will follow. I immediately understood. If this goes on, I won't be the one to trade, but he will let me. It wasn't Valerian himself that bothered me. What bothered me was that he was disrupting the already precious balance of the power in the cordon and in the zone. I started to negotiate, to make peace. And where there is peace, there is less shooting. And where there is less shooting, there is less buying ammunition, medicine, and everything else. Business, nothing personal. So I thought, what if I could push this situation a little? The military were nervous. They didn't go deep into the zone, but they shot indiscriminately. I am no fool. I didn't do anything directly. I just started a few random rumors saying Valerian would bypass them to take artifacts out of the zone, then Kaletki would be left without his dues, and the military authorities didn't like it when they are left without unofficial financial support. Of course, the raids began to target the bandits in order to push Valerian against the wall from both sides. Everything was planned. And then, like thunder on a clear sky, S.T.A.L.K.E.R emerges from the swamps. Who he is, where he came from, no one really knew at the time. He runs around like a madman, climbs into places where no normal person would climb, and he ruins my entire play in this game of chess. It's always like this. You plan quietly to remove a piece from the board, but some other scoundrel comes running, whom the zone can't even count, and the game starts all over again. The zone. What can you take from it?
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC-1205. As of May 2012, the only road to Pripyat from the south of the zone that was not blocked by anomalies was through the so-called Brain Scorcher, a huge psi installation that zombified everyone who came under its radiation. Only the Monolithians were not affected by it. A stalker nicknamed Strelok was able to obtain a prototype of a neuroprotective lining helmet from Dr. Sakharov and calibrate it to protect himself from the antennas. Having fought his way through the ranks of the Monolithians to the X-10 laboratory, from which the Scorcher was controlled, he was able to turn off the installation, opening the way to Pripyat and the CNPP to anyone who wanted to. The news of the installation's shutdown quickly spread throughout the zone. The military immediately prepared Operation Monolith, which also included a landing on the territory of the Brain Scorcher. At this time, all factions expressed their intention to gain a foothold in Pripyat. Even experienced neutrals, who usually did not participate in global unrest, gathered in teams to break into the city. Freedom and duty were competing to gain control, not only over the Ghost City, but also over the passage to the CNPP. All over Pripyat, there were battles of everyone against everyone. Case File Materials Number 6. Seized from a military sergeant.
The road to Pripyat is open again. I don't know what's going on there, but everybody was put on alert in order to prepare for departure. I'm in the crew flying to the infamous Brain Scorcher. The other guys are flying to the CMPP. Will we really end this damned zone soon? Resistance is minimal. Most of the Monolithians have been killed. But it seems that mutants also came running to the battle between stalkers and Monolithians to feed on the fresh corpses. 2 of our men were wounded by a bloodsucker. But we dealt with that scoundrel. We asked the foreman to keep us thermal imagers. We would have noticed him earlier. Damn! Yesterday, we received the news that the crews who flew to the CMPP were killed. There is still no information about when we will be evacuated. Supplies are already running out, and we're fighting off hordes of stalkers and mutants with the guns left from the fanatics. I never thought I would be happy to see a stalker's face. Yesterday, a detachment of duty broke through the ranks of the anarchists to reach us. It's a good thing that they wear black uniforms, which stand out perfectly against the background of everyone else in the zone. We agreed with our commander that it would help us get to the perimeter of the zone. Now, all that's left is to break through to Rostock, and from there, to our allies nearby.
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC-1206. When the battles for the opportunity to gain a foothold and control the city continued in Pripyat, the military command decided to take advantage of the chaos caused by the shutdown of the Brain Scorcher and promptly organized Operation Monolith to establish control over the CNPP. Despite the successful landing of the aeroported troops from helicopters near the station, the Monolithians stubbornly resisted the assault of both the army and stalkers. The military had managed to gain a foothold on the territory of the station when they were caught by an unexpected emission. Only a few soldiers were able to escape. Among them was Colonel Kowalski. Taking advantage of the clashes between the military, stalkers, and Monolithians, Strelok was able to break into the CNPP before the emission and open the door to X7 using an unauthorized decoder. There he met with the representative of C Consciousness, who offered him to join side with the scientists. The Stalker decided to destroy them instead. A possible motive for Strelok's actions was the hope for the disappearance of anomalous activity in the zone. The elimination of the life support capsules in which the project participants were located led to the destruction of the management structure that restrained the chaotic processes of the zone. As a result, the zone lost centralized control, and its behavior became even less predictable. Emissions became more frequent, anomalous fields changed, and some territories underwent significant transformations. The Monolith group ceased to exist. Fighters deprived of Psi control died, lost their minds, or slowly regained fragments of their own personality. Case File Materials Number 7, seized from a Monolithian.
He disappeared suddenly, like pressure, like gravity holding everything together. Just yesterday, every step was right, every shot justified, every death necessary. And today, there is silence, an emptiness that makes my ears ring. I stood in position and waited for an order. Out of habit, not an order. But there was no order. The monolith is silent. I try to hear at least an echo, a whisper, an impulse, a headache, at least something. Nothing. Only the wind and the crackling of the dosimeter. Confidence disappeared along with the voice. The world became heavier and stranger. Before, it was simple. The enemy is a target that must be destroyed. Now, questions have arisen. Why are my hands shaking? Why don't I remember anything that happened before? Fragments pop up in my head, orders like memories. These memories are foreign and at the same time mine. Did I really have a life before this? On the mainland? Because if that's true, then who have I been all this time? When the monolith disappeared, some of the brothers were screaming, some were shooting randomly as if trying to pierce the silence with bullets. But most of them are sitting, leaning against the walls, staring at one spot. We are still together, but no longer united. There is no center, no will to hold us together. I don't know what to do next. The monolith is gone. There's only the zone. It just is. Cold, indifferent, and aggressive. If there's anything human left in me, I'll have to learn to live with what I have done. If not, then the silence inside will become my new monolith.
SIRCAA Archive, Section PP1208. Given the previous experience of the failure of Operation Monolith, the command concluded that the elimination of Psi consciousness would allow a new operation to be carried out quickly and with minimal losses. In the summer of 2012, the government decided to launch a military operation codenamed Fairway. Its goal was to establish complete control over the Chernobyl NPP and the surrounding areas. At the preparatory stage, military analysts and scientific units compiled detailed maps of the anomalous fields, recording areas of increased danger and determining the so-called Fairway, a conditionally safe route for the advancement of aviation and ground forces. It was along this route that the main units were to land in the Chernobyl area. During the mission, the operation failed. Communication with all the vehicles was lost, and the fate of the crews and the landing force remained unknown. To clarify the circumstances of the tragedy, the Security Service of Ukraine sent its agent, a former stalker, Major Alexander Degtyarev, to the zone. Working undercover, he was to establish the reasons for the failure of Operation Fairway, collect data on the downed helicopters, and if possible, find and evacuate the fighters who managed to survive. Later, it became known that only one group survived, led by Colonel Kowalski, and it was able to gain a foothold in the Landromat in Pripyat. Case File Materials Number 8. Excerpt from a report of a military sergeant from the Stingray 1 group.
After landing at the helipad near the Yaniv station, our group, led by Colonel Kowalski, found itself in a mined area. Sergeant Sliachin was the first to be blown up by a mine shortly after disembarking from Stingray 1. Since we were already on the outskirts of Pripyat, the colonel chose point B28 near the Prometheus Cinema for evacuation. Still near the minefield, we met a stalker who offered help and showed us the way past the anomalous fields to Pripyat. Already in the city, we encountered fierce resistance from fanatics and were unable to reach B28. The colonel decided to retreat to the laundromat. Patrols and observation posts were organized around the building. As it turned out, one of the patrols later came across a group of stalkers led by SBU Major Degtyarev. I would like to add that this raised the morale of the fighters, since some had already begun to fear that we had been abandoned to our fate. In my subjective opinion, Colonel Kowalski acted in accordance with the situation when he sent a group to clear the hospital, where the squad was ambushed by the Monolithians. He is not to blame for the failure of Operation Fairway, since he did not have information about the change in the location of the anomalies during its planning. He did not exert moral or physical pressure on me.
SIRCAA Archive. Excerpt from Personal File SC6447. Call sign Skif. Real name Yevgen Martinenko. Age 25 years old. Faction Neutrals. Status Stalker. File opened on September 25, 2021. Education and personal traits. Has a complete secondary education, graduated from school with a silver medal. From a young age, he was distinguished by increased curiosity, a tendency to take risks, and an attraction to conflict and dangerous situations. He was characterized as a person with an unstable behavior model in a peaceful social environment. Military experience and post-service adaptation. Completed military service, participated in combat operations. After demobilization, adaptation to civilian life was difficult. During this time, he was involved in the illegal trade of so-called dummies, artifacts that lost their active properties outside the Anomalous Zone. Incident with the Alpha artifact. In 2021, an object previously identified as an Alpha artifact appeared in Yevgen Martinenko's apartment. The event ended with the complete destruction of the apartment. Dr. Herman offered him a financial reward on the condition of confirming the object's alpha class and recharging it using the Topaz scanner in the anomalous field. For this purpose, Martinenko went to the zone, where he soon became the victim of a robbery. Search for the scanner. The search led Skif to the former base of the Clear Sky faction in the swamps. After neutralizing the base's protective psi radiation, he came into contact with the Monolith preacher, known by the pseudonym Faust. During these actions, Skif discovered the lost scanner with the artifact and delivered it to SIRCAA in order to receive a financial reward. Participation in the events near Duga. After the former radar complex Duga was converted into a monolith emitter, Skif voluntarily agreed to take part in the fighting against the fanatics, and played a key role in the elimination of the leader of the Monolithians. Interaction with S.T.C. Malachite. According to the agents, Skif learned at S.T.C. Malachite about the existence of the so-called subtle matter, an information medium that can store the imprints of the consciousness of all living beings, and interacted with the imprint of a member of the C consciousness group. Interest and risks for the regulatory board. His involvement in key events in the zone, as well as his proven ability to survive and operate in areas of critical instability, make him a valuable but uncontrolled asset. Constant covert surveillance limited access to sensitive information, and use exclusively within the framework of controlled operations are recommended. Current status and undetermined intentions. It is known that Martinenko has made contact with Strelok and the Doctor, and is actively seeking a way to break through the boundary towards Pripyat. The ultimate goal of these actions remains unclear to the regulatory board. Surveillance is underway. Case File Materials Number 9, from the personal notes of Dr. Dalin. Today, with the colonel at the slag heap, I had an interesting conversation with a stalker nicknamed Skif. He struck me as neither a hero nor an accidental performer, but a rare resource that the zone sometimes produces contrary to its own logic. He combines endurance, the ability to adapt quickly, and the absence of unnecessary illusions about who he is and what he does. It is precisely such people who are able to reach places where scientific expeditions never reach. He is an excellent tool for achieving our goal, not burdened by ideology, not inclined to ask unnecessary questions if he sees a practical benefit. He does not demand explanations that could jeopardize the research, and at the same time is smart enough to understand the limits of what is permissible. This makes him an ideal mediator between theory and field reality. So far our goals coincide, but that's for now. SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file SC6476. Call sign Richter. Real name unknown. Age 28. Faction neutrals. Status free guide. File opened on September 26, 2021. Origin and early years. Richter grew up in an orphanage. During this period, he developed a strong interest in the Chernobyl exclusion zone as a symbol of freedom and an alternative to a controlled existence. At the age of 16, he left the orphanage on his own and illegally entered the zone. Initial experience of the zone. One of his early trips ended with him being struck by an electrical anomaly. Richter survived, but received a characteristic scar along his temple in the form of a branching lightning strike. The incident did not reduce his motivation, but only strengthened his intention to gain sufficient experience and training. Training and connections. He was a student of the Guide, a legendary stalker known for his collaboration with Strelok. After the death of his mentor, he maintained personal contact with both Strelok and S.T.A.L.K.E.R. With the latter's assistance, he was introduced to the Spark group, but did not accept formal membership, remaining a free stalker. Further activities. At the request of Strelok, he performed the duties of a guide in the Lesser Zone. He participated in the collection and transmission of information about scanners. He is aware of Strelok's status as one of the most wanted persons in the zone, so he carefully conceals the fact of their acquaintance. Traumatic experience. The death of neutral stalkers Bodge and Joker while crossing an anomalous area was a serious psychological turning point for Richter. The event undermined his confidence in his own understanding of the zone and formed a persistent sense of guilt, which later transformed into a willingness to help others, even to the detriment of personal gain. Worldview and beliefs. Richter shares the idea of the stalker's freedom and the concept of a free zone. He is openly hostile to the world, recognizing its power but not its authority. He acts pragmatically, avoiding unnecessary risk. He considers murder exclusively as a last resort, preferring peaceful conflict resolution. Interest and risks for the regulatory board. Richter is of moderate operational interest. As an experienced guide and carrier of practical knowledge about the Lesser Zone, he can be a useful source of information and a potential freelance agent. At the same time, his informal connections with Strelok and S.T.A.L.K.E.R, as well as his expressed disloyalty to the zone's control structures, create a potential risk of data leakage and uncontrolled interference in research activities. Covert surveillance without direct pressure is recommended, with the possibility of targeted involvement through mutually beneficial agreements. Case File Materials Number 10, seized from an unknown stalker.
I remember how Richter and I once broke through to Pripyat. The city, as always, was silent. Only the wind creaked through the broken windows. Already a little tipsy, we went with the guys to another high-rise building without any hope of finding anything. There was the standard set, empty rooms, peeling walls, traces of an old life. In one of the apartments, Richter suddenly stopped and nodded at an old bedside table. Old cassettes lay among the yellowed newspapers, ordinary, warm, with illegible handwritten signatures. I didn't immediately believe that such a thing could have been preserved here. In another room, we found an old player. Someone had batteries in their backpack, when a quiet, slightly hoarse singing poured from the headphones. Pripyat seemed to revive. For a few minutes, the zone ceased to be the zone. Richter was silent at first, and then he started dancing. I never saw him again without that player. This music from the ghost city definitely became a part of his life.
SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file SC4568. Call sign Colonel Korshunov, real name unknown, age 55, faction Ward, status faction leader. File opened on September 28, 2021. Origin and training. Comes from a military family. At the age of 16 was a cadet in Special Forces school. Formed exclusively in a military environment, civilian social models of behaviors were poorly learned. The early start of service led to strict discipline and an authoritarian management style. Military career. He carried out his first foreign mission as a consultant from the USSR in Africa. He participated in the war in Afghanistan with the rank of captain. During one of the operations, his unit was ambushed. Korshunov, while covering the retreat, was wounded and dropped out of the battle. Command was taken over by one of his subordinate lieutenants, whose erroneous decisions led to catastrophic losses and the complete failure of the operation. Despite the circumstances, Korshunov defended his subordinate from the tribunal, and he himself avoided trial thanks to his status as a repeatedly awarded veteran. However, he was discharged from the armed forces without honors. This episode became key in the formation of his extreme distrust of command structures and people in general. First actions in the zone. In 2015, Korshunov accepted Agatha's offer to lead an important force with the direct task of protecting SIRCAA and restoring order in the zone. Korshunov inherited the agent network and systematically applied the divide and conquer strategy, purposefully exacerbating internal contradictions between factions. His actions directly caused splits within freedom and duty. Key operations. Colonel Korshunov organized and conducted a lightning operation to clear the chemical plant of a group of stalkers from the Spark faction. The chemical plant became the ward's main base in the zone. Organized the Zenith operation, but did not lead the column due to Agatha's direct prohibition and the requirement to be in the control room of the X-11 facility. After the failure of Zenith, he initiated an internal investigation and asked Agatha about the legitimacy of the losses incurred. After reviewing the full plan of the operation, he recognized the need for its implementation. The colonel was responsible for the security of SIRCAA during the experiment with the Alpha artifact in X-11. Despite the interception of a group of saboteurs organized from former Monolith sectarians, the experiment failed and did not go according to plan. Psychological portrait: tough, strong-willed, uncompromising, prone to manipulation and strategic thinking, absolutely distrusts stalkers and civilian structures, but is also able to recognize professionalism and loyalty. For subordinates, he can be both a stable patron and a deadly enemy. He considers people a resource, but appreciates those who have proven their efficiency and loyalty. Interest and benefit for the regulatory board. Colonel Korshunov is a critically important asset. He ensures the Institute's power stability, the protection of facilities, control over key territories of the zone, and the effective deterrence of stalker factions. His agent network, operational experience, and readiness for tough decisions make him indispensable in phases of escalation. At the same time, Korshunov poses a potential systemic risk in the event of a loss of political or administrative control. He acts autonomously, thinks in terms of military expediency, and can ignore scientific or ethical limitations for the sake of achieving a result. His loyalty is not tied to the regulatory board as such, but to Agatha and the concept of order at any cost. Case File Materials Number 11, from the personal correspondence of Ward Sergeant Semigolova.
Colleague, you asked why we call the kettle an alpha artifact? In short, I'll tell you. There was business at the chemical plant. The morning began calmly, the zone was silent, there was no alarm, the mutants were in a acting nap. In a control block of the chemical plants, the officers on duty decided to take advantage of the rare loo and brew tea. The old electric kettle, which looks as if it had survived the appearance of the zone, clicked rigorously and knocked the power out. The light went out just at the moment when Korshunov entered the officer's room. Silence fell. The same silence that usually makes even those who never believe in the zone start praying. "Report!" the colonel said calmly. The guard, pale as if he had just thrown out, answered honestly. "Comrade Colonel, the kettle!" Korshunov silently looked at the dark monitor, then at the kettle, then back at the soldier. The pause was so loud that somewhere far away a cough was born. "All right," Korshunov finally said. "If I lose control of the situation in the zone because of the kettle, I'll start with the kettle, then with those who turn them on without permission." He lifted the switch of the machine himself, turning on the power. He watched as the monitor light up and added, "Drink your tea, but remember, the zone does not forgive mistakes, even household ones." From that day on, an unspoken rule appeared in the ward. Before turning on any equipment, first check if Korshunov is nearby. And the kettle received the call sign Alpha Artifact.
SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file SC3244, call sign Dr. Dalin, real name Dmitro Valentinovich Dalin, age 40, faction SIRCAA, status head of the Institute, file opened on September 30, 2021. Education and biography. Born in late 1981 into a family of intellectuals. His father is Valentin Dalin, a prominent scientist, one of the key members of the C consciousness group, directly involved in the experiments that resulted in the formation of the zone. Thanks to his natural abilities, he studied without much effort. He entered the physics faculty of the Taras Shevchenko National University of Kiev, where he demonstratively ignored the educational process for the first few years, while passing exams flawlessly. Thanks to the influence of Professor Zakharov, he changed his attitude towards studies and graduated from the university ahead of schedule, and later defended his candidate and doctoral dissertations in record time. I still remember the face of those professors from the commission, how surprised they were when they first saw me. Activities within the framework of the Zone project and SIRCAA took up the post of director of SIRCAA shortly after its establishment. His views on the directions of the institution's work did not coincide with the vision of Strelok, one of the founders of the institute. He perceives the zones as a family affair, a continuation of his father's work. I knew that my father would be brought into this. The zone for him is not only a scientific phenomenon, but also an unfinished business with his father. He considers it, firstly, as the result of genius that has gotten out of control, secondly, as proof that the human mind is capable of changing reality, thirdly, as a mistake that is either impossible to correct or must be brought to its logical conclusion. Interaction with the world. Regards the security forces with hidden contempt, but recognizes the practical mind and perseverance of Colonel Korshunov. Their relationship is based on forced mutual respect and a balance of interests. Psychological portrait. Obsessed with science, knowledge, and expanding the boundaries of the possible. Prone to intellectual risk, constantly tempted to look beyond the horizon, even when it's dangerous. Ambitious, in dire need of recognition of scientific status. Without ambition, nothing can be done in SIRCAA, and it is not worth getting into science at all. Not inclined to self-sacrifice or asceticism, highly values his own intelligence and requires appropriate conditions, resources, and freedom of action. With full support, able to work with extreme intensity. In working with subordinates, demanding, ironic, psychologically tough, but loyal, prefers to solve problems within the team, shielding employees from the forceful intervention of the world. He despises physical violence. He considers psychological pressure an acceptable tool for the sake of a scientific goal. Interest and benefit for the regulatory board. Dr. Dalin is a unique dual-purpose asset. On one hand, he provides an unprecedented level of understanding of the processes associated with the zone. On the other hand, his personal motive, associated with the figure of Valentin Dalin, creates the risk of shifting priorities from institutional to personal. His activities are potentially capable of opening the way to control or transform the zone, recreating or completing C consciousness experiments in a new form, leading to the repetition of critical errors, but at a higher level of complexity. Recommendation: keep Dr. Dmitro Dalin in the active control loop of SIRCAA, combining expended resources with covert strategic surveillance. To balance the doctor's ambitions, he should be left under the control of Colonel Korshunov and Agatha. Oh yes, almost every day I feel Agatha's chain around my neck and the Colonel's piercing gaze. Sometimes it seems that they control every step of my life. Case File Materials Number 12, from Dmitro Dalin's explanatory note on the need to conduct the second Caribbean experiment. In regard to the current state of the anomalous infrastructure and the limited possibilities of its control, I consider it necessary to once again raise the issue of conducting an experiment similar to the Caribbean one. Available data indicates that the Alpha artifact is a key element in the functioning of the Monolith installation and the generators. Its absence nullifies attempts at centralized control of anomalous energy, leaving SIRCAA in a position of reactive rather than proactive control. The practice of artificial synthesis of artifacts, despite the successes achieved, fundamentally does not allow to recreate the properties of the Alpha artifact. This is confirmed by both experimental results and theoretical models developed on the basis of materials from the X11 laboratory. The only confirmed origin of Alpha is the resonant interaction of the psi field of the noosphere, recorded during the 1995 experiment. The very fact of the spontaneous formation of the Alpha artifact outside the zone proves that a repetition of the Caribbean experiment is not only possible, but also reproducible, as long as the appropriate level of security is provided. Refusal to conduct the experiment would mean strategic stagnation of SIRCAA and further loss of control over anomalous processes. Realizing the risks, I insist, a controlled experiment is much safer and more predictable than waiting for another super emission with unpredictable consequences. Director of SIRCAA, Dr. Dmitro Valentinovich Dalin. SIRCAA Archive. Excerpt from Personal File CN8625. Call sign SCAR. Real name unknown. Age 42. Faction Spark. Status Faction Leader. File opened September 10, 2011. Activities in the Zone. 2008. One of the first stalkers to reach the Monolith and survive. 2011 Autumn. As a mercenary, he was integrated by Sea Consciousness into the Clear Sky faction in order to find and neutralize Strelok. He deactivated his psi protection near the CNPP. Presumably 2014, he leads the Spark faction, which specializes in supporting and assisting scientists in field research, organizes a base at the chemical plant. 2015, after the conflict between Spark and the Ward at the chemical plant, he forms a personal attitude towards systemic confrontation with the Ward and personally with Colonel Korshunov. Recruitment and programming. Probably recruited by Sea Consciousness and subjected to neuroprogramming shortly after the Battle of Clear Sky near the CNPP. We suspect that he was implanted with a new directive. There is a hypothesis that SCAR is aware of his own programming, but is either unable to resist it, or consciously refuses to do so, since he considers the program the only meaning of his existence. Connection with Faust. Agatha suspects that SCAR is the actual architect of the events related to Faust, namely that it was he who planned and implemented the chain of events that led to contact with Sea Consciousness. He's the only known person capable of surviving an emission, except for the Monolithians. His plan was probably thwarted after Faust realized he was being used. It is possible that he sees a Skif as a new tool or assistant. Fears and limitations. The only recorded fear is the disruption of the plan to reach the Shining Zone by outside forces, Strelok, the Ward, or an unknown third player. Personal survival, losses, reputation, or sacrifices are of no importance to him. Risks to the Regulatory Board. SCAR poses an existential threat of the highest level. Unlike other subjects of the zone, he is not subject to classical deterrence, blackmail, or motivation. His actions do not depend on the political situation, orders, or losses. S.T.A.L.K.E.R perceives failures not as defeats, but as path corrections. It is recommended to consider S.T.A.L.K.E.R as the bearer of an autonomous program. Elimination or neutralization is necessary. The lack of active action may have unpredictable consequences for the Zone program. Case File Materials number 13 from Professor Bergman's correspondence dated August 9, 2011.
Regarding the question of the guide, we were advised to proceed cautiously, without unnecessary details. But now, I understand why. It's about a stalker named Skull. He didn't seem to be a person who seeks to make an impression. He showed up on time, clarified the purpose of the expedition without unnecessary talks, checked the equipment, and immediately took the road on his own. During the transition, he was calm, stepping the group several times, even before our devices recorded anomalous fluctuations. It seemed that he was guided not by indicators, but by behavior of the terrain. He was concise. The expedition ended without losses and with a full volume of data. Therefore, if you need a guide to work on the swamps area, I strongly recommend that Skull. I didn't see any alternative in terms of reliability of the moment. I know that he is currently interested in orders in that area of the zone.
SIRCAA Archive. Excerpt from Personal File PP2653. Call sign Strider. Real name unknown. Age 30 to 35. Faction Monolith. Status Squad Commander. File opened August 10, 2012. Activities before the formation of Noontide. Former Monolith member. Activities before recruitment into Monolith have not been established. After losing his Psi connection with the Monolith in the summer of 2012, he helped Degtyarev break through to Pripyat during his investigation of the failure of Operation Fairway. He collaborated with the Corps at an early stage of its formation. Psychological portrait. Stable with signs of chronic fatigue, has a high level of reflection, an internal conflict between the desire for redemption and fear of his own past. For him, as for most former Monolithians, the disconnection with the Monolith was an existential crisis, a loss of support, meaning, and external will. Unlike many others, he did not degrade or disappear, but tried to build a new structure of coexistence for those who were lost like himself. Activities within Noon. Among the Noontiders, Strider is most similar to someone who can be called an official leader. In the faction, he performs the role of a moral guide. Strider's authority is based not on strength or fear, but on experience and the ability to take responsibility. He avoids talking about the Monolith's past, but at the same time seeks to understand what exactly happened to him and his people, and whether forgiveness is possible for them. Activities after the signal. After the signal was activated, Strider's personality was completely erased, giving way to a restored Monolithian, capable of carrying out the will of his deity without hesitation. Interest and risks for the Regulatory Board. Strider was of considerable analytical interest as a stabilized former agent under Psi influence, capable of functioning without external control. His experience could be used to study the long-term consequences of Psi programming and the possibilities of rehabilitation. But after the signal was reactivated, he became an uncontrolled agent of the enemy forces, with access to the faction and strategic areas of the zone. It is recommended to eliminate him by our forces or via agents. Case File Materials number 14, taken from a neutral.
Pripyat is a lost city. I was there once, just shortly after Degtyarev pulled the military out of the city. Then everything seemed to have died down in the zone, and it became quiet. The guys and I fought, Since it was such a thing, it would be a sin not to take a look. We wanted to take a quick walk, see what was left, maybe look for some interesting loot. But Pripyat, as you know, does not take guests. In one of the courtyards, we came under crossfire from several houses. I hear, brothers, I see the infidels. Death to sinners. Another nonsense from these crazy people. I already thought that was it. We're done. And then, out of nowhere, Strider appears with another group of fighters. They're all from the Monolith. Calm as a bow. He didn't pay any attention to the traces of the bullets. They surrounded us and closed us off from those idiots. He spoke to them quietly, evenly, like a preacher to his flock. About this, about that, about peace. That the stalkers are not enemies. That he knows what they feel. And then a miracle happened. The Monolithians stopped shooting and came out of their shelters with their weapons lowered. They just nodded to us to leave. We left quickly, without looking back. But somehow I don't have a burning desire to go to Pripyat again. I'm living well in Zaton.
SIRCAA Archive. Excerpt from personal file SC7266. Call sign Faust. Real name unknown. Age 45. Faction Monolith. Status Faction Leader. File opened on August 20, 2012. Origin. Faust is a unique product of the controller program. C Consciousness considered him to be the future general of the Monolith army, but Faust himself from the very beginning perceived C Consciousness as demons that drown out the voice of the true God. After the execution of the scientists by Strelok and the disappearance of the voice of the Monolith, Faust lost the meaning of his existence. The blind and mentally disoriented Faust was picked up by Strider and brought into Noontide. Neurophysical features. Despite his physical blindness, Faust perceives reality in the Psi spectrum and possesses the full range of a controller's abilities. For a long time, he hid this, not wanting to arouse suspicion. Activities in Noon. Gradually, Faust decided to bring back the call of the Monolith to force others to hear it again. He quickly evolved from a closed fanatic to a charismatic preacher and leader. He initiated an operation using the scanner core delivered to SIRCAA, and during the experiment, rewrote the Monolith signal to himself. He subsequently initiated the reprogramming of the Duga in order to repeatedly amplify the call. Current status. During the implementation of measures to destroy the revived Monolith and neutralize the signal from the Duga, Faust was eliminated. However, given his anomalous psi abilities, there are reasons to suspect that Faust's elimination could have just been an illusion. Risks to the Regulatory Board. Faust has proven the possibility of autonomously intercepting and rewriting monolith-level psi signals, creating a precedent of critical threat. His example demonstrates that even a single subject is capable of initiating mass psi radicalization, disrupting control of the anomalous infrastructure, and using SIRCAA resources against the Institute itself. Surveillance agents must obtain comprehensive evidence that Faust has been eliminated, and that other experimental results do not indicate similar activity in the zone. Case File Materials Number 15, taken from the PDA of a Monolithian.
After the monolith was revived, I woke up among the ruins of the shelter with a hum in my head that was sweeter than silence. The monolith spoke again, not with words, but with orders. with confidence, with correctness in every step. And along with the call, something that had not been there for years returned. Memories. I remembered Pripyat, empty avenues, broken windows of houses, and him, Faust. Even then he had a special look, the look not of a blind man, but of a commander. He walked ahead, always knowing where the ambush was, where the trap was, and where the anomaly was. We trusted him without question. If Faust said to stand, then we stood. If he said to go, we went, even to hell itself, because his voice was an echo of the voice of the Monolith. The Monolith's call put everything in its place. Faust was my commander then, and he remains so now. He will lead us, his children, to the true will of the Monolith, to what the Zone and the true God really need.
SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file TC6664, call sign Strelok, also known as Marked One, age 44, faction neutral, status Stalker. File opened September 10, 2008. Biography. In August 2008, Strelok, then a soldier, was sent to the Zone, where he fell victim to the betrayal of a corrupt commander and was left to his own demise. He was saved by a stalker nicknamed Ghost. After this incident, Strelok broke up with his military past and formed his own group of stalkers, which was later joined by Fong and Dr. In the summer of 2011, Strelok's group penetrated the sarcophagus of the CNPP and thereby caused a super emission. In August of the same year, Strelok disappeared during another attempt to break into the sarcophagus. At that time, he was mistakenly coded by C Consciousness as an agent of the Stalker program, with the task of eliminating himself. He was thrown back into the Zone with amnesia. In May 2012, Strelok eliminated the gang leader Borov. Later, he disabled the Brain Scorcher installation and destroyed C Consciousness, which radically changed the balance of power in the Zone. In August 2012, Strelok helped Major Degtyarev during the evacuation of the military after the failure of Operation Fairway. 2013, Strelok participated in the founding of SIRCAA and served as its chief scientific consultant. He later left the institute, committing sabotage and stating that the institute's leadership seeks to control the Zone, not explore it. Psychological profile. He is characterized by exceptional adaptability and high stress resistance, which allows him to act autonomously in conditions of constant mortal threat. His will is practically not subject to external pressure, and his ability to find a way out of critical situations borders on instinct. At the same time, he demonstrates emotional detachment in communication, a tendency to be obsessed with his own goal, and deep suspicion of any power structures or hierarchies. Risks to the regulatory board. Strelok poses a set of strategic risks. His behavior is unpredictable, since he does not recognize formal subordination and acts exclusively in accordance to his own vision of the situation. In the event of a divergence of goals, he is able to speak out without hesitation. His deep practical knowledge of the Zone exceeds the theoretical achievements of most SIRCAA specialists, and in the event of deliberate sabotage or information leakage, this knowledge can be used by hostile factions. Given his previous actions, which have already led to large-scale and irreversible changes in the Zone, further intervention by Strelok can have global and difficult-to-predict consequences. According to Agatha, Strelok is preparing another sabotage against the forces of the regulatory board. If he cannot be re-recruited, he must be eliminated or neutralized. Case File Materials number 16 from Strelok's diary.
The zone no longer seems to me like a cancerous tumor on the body of the planet. Once I was sure that it needed to be destroyed, burned to the ground. Now I understand that this was too simple an explanation for a complex phenomenon. The zone is not a sentence. It is a reaction, a form of the universe's response to human intervention. It cannot be reduced to the categories of good or evil. I understand the zone better than those who try to describe it with formulas and reports. It lives by its own logic, where anomalies, emission, and distorted life forms are not errors, but elements of a new equilibrium. Despite Kaimanov's hypocrisy, I definitely agree with him on one thing. Mutants are not a failure of the system and not an enemy by definition. They are part of the zone's fauna, adapted to an environment that in itself no longer belongs to the usual world. Their destruction would mean repeating the same mistake, an attempt to impose order where it had already formed differently. The zone deserves peace, not control, not experiments, and not the next rescue programs. But only I, after so many years in the zone, realize what it really needs.
SIRCAA Archive extract from personal file TC3546. Call sign Dr. Real name Dr. Kaimanov. Age 75. Faction Neutrals. Status Stalker. File opened on May 18, 2012. Scientific career. At the age of 25, Kaimanov joined the work on Project X. He began his scientific career in the field of light physics and optical devices, and was at the origin of the creation of an improved domestic electron microscope. His key achievement was the introduction of cold auto-emission cathodes instead of thermionic ones, which required a fundamentally new level of vacuum and overcoming technical limitations. Over time, Kaimanov's interests shifted to particle physics, where he quickly gained a reputation as one of the leading specialists. The central idea of Kaimanov's life was to confirm the theory of the existence of the noosphere, the global information field of Earth. It was this interest that led him to active participation in Project X, and allowed him to quickly create a theoretical basis for the key element of the future installation, the assembly block, or focusing block. Project X and subsequent events. During the stage of active work on Project X, Kaimanov was offered full support and unlimited resources. However, the death of his friend and colleague Kniazinski caused a deep psychological crisis, because of which the doctor temporarily abandoned further research. The turning point was his acquaintance with the scientist Zakharov, who proposed to experimentally test the hypothesis of the existence of the Earth's information field. Despite the skeptical attitude of the scientific community to this idea, Kaimanov agreed to resume work. At different times, the doctor worked in the X-18 and X-5 laboratories. It was there that he created the so-called Kaimanov emitter, capable of directly influencing the human psi field. He was a member of the Psi consciousness group. However, for unknown reasons, he refused at the last moment to participate in their experiment to connect to the noosphere. Behavior in the zone. Hiding his own role in the formation of the zone and the fact he worked with the Psi consciousness group, he later joined Strelok's squad. According to Stalker legends, Kaimanov consistently helped all living beings, regardless of their nature. In 2011, he is credited with the unique case of taming a pseudodog, which indirectly confirms his deep understanding of psi processes and behavioral mechanisms of mutants. Interest and risks for the Regulatory Board. Kaimanov is of exceptional scientific interest as one of the few researchers able to combine theory of the noosphere, practical knowledge of psi radiation, and direct experience of interacting with the zone. His developments can become the basis for breakthrough discoveries and the creation of new generation technologies. At the same time, Kaimanov is a serious risk, because he fundamentally does not accept the idea of controlling the zone, deliberately concealed his own role in its emergence, and has close informal ties with Strelok. In the event he resumes his activity, his actions may contradict the strategic interests of the Institute and lead to the leakage of critically important information or ideological sabotage from within. Case File Materials number 17, intercepted from the messages of an unknown stalker.
Once I came across a pack of blind dogs in the Red Forest, and I only had 2 bullets left. I started running like I had never run before. I missed my landmark, I lost my route, and ran straight into an anomaly. The air squeezed my chest, the world twisted, the pain hit me sharply, and everything disappeared. I came to my senses from the smell of alcohol and dried herbs in some hut. And when I tried to move, I saw the stitches on my side. They were even, they were neat. Not everyone will be able to mend it like that. When I turned my head, the doctor was in the hut. The same legendary doctor. And he was standing at the table, his back to me, focused, as if he wasn't like in a laboratory. And someone else was lying on the table. But it wasn't a stalker, it was a dog. One of the same ones that chased me through the forest. Bloody, with a torn side, but alive. And the doctor methodically applied the stitches, taking his time, not even looking back at me.
SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file PP3326, call sign Degi, real name Alexander Degtyarev, age 40, faction Core, status faction leader, file opened August 3rd, 2012. Education and background. Information about education is missing. It is known that he was born in Pripyat, but was evacuated as a child after the Chernobyl accident in 1986. Path in the zone. After illegally entering the zone, Degtyarev quickly established himself as a cold-blooded, systematic, and extremely tenacious stalker. It was this reputation that became the basis for his recruitment by the SBU. His first known task with the status of operative was the investigation of the failure of Operation Fairway in August 2012 and the evacuation of the surviving military personnel. Then Degtyarev not only established complex contacts between stalkers and military personnel, but also gained key knowledge about the real causes of the disaster, the changing structure of air anomalies. The decisive role in the final phase of the operation was played by Strelok, with whom Degtyarev later maintained contact, facilitating his involvement within SIRCAA. Service in the SBU and promotion. After Fairway, Degtyarev was offered a staff position on the mainland, but he chose to return to the zone as a permanent SBU observer. It was during this period that he discovered a whole complex of X-laboratories near Pripyat, which maintains communication between psi installations throughout the zone. Realizing the potential for disaster if outside forces gained access to the complex, Degtyarev initiated a report to the SBU leadership. The service promoted him to the rank of colonel and granted him the authority to completely restrict access to Pripyat. This is how the boundary and a new faction, the Core, appeared, the purpose of which was to protect Pripyat from unwanted visitors. Current status. After the Monolith resumed its activity in 2021, the boundary experienced a breakthrough. Degtyarev personally led the operation to regain control over Pripyat, which ended with the encirclement of his unit at the energetic palace of S.T.A.L.K.E.R. The colonel's further status has not been officially confirmed. Interest and risks for the regulatory board. Degtyarev is of considerable interest as a bearer of unique practical knowledge about Pripyat, the laboratory complex, and the containment mechanisms of the zone. At the same time, he is potentially the dangerous subject. His loyalty is not directed to scientific structures, but to the SBU. He has his own vision of the balance of power in the zone. In the event of a conflict of interest, he is able to block or forcibly stop the initiatives of the regulatory board if he considers them a threat to the stability of the zone or state security. Case file materials number 18, taken from the internal archive of the Corps.
During the survey of Pripyat, our detachment under the command of Major Degtyarev decided to inspect the building of the medical unit number 126. After clearing the ground floors, a basement with atypical engineering structures and hermetic doors that did not belong to the civilian part of the hospital was discovered. Going down below, we entered technical corridors typical of facilities such as X-laboratories. The underground archive preserved documentation, journals, diagrams, and fragments of reports. Degtyarev personally studied the materials. His reaction was sharp and unusual. I saw that he noticeably paled, fell silent, and reread individual pages. Then, we received an order to stop the research. Degtyarev ordered to close all accesses to preserve the facility according to standard protocols and strictly forbade to disclose the existence of the laboratory under the medical unit 126 to anyone, including other soldiers of the detachment. He did not provide explanations, only noted that there were things that should not be disturbed a second time.
SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file SC2226. Insufficient access level. To obtain access, contact the security service of the regulatory board. Insufficient? This is some kind of mistake. I am the director of SIRCAA. I should have the highest access level. No, Colonel, I do not play these games. I need to know what's in her file. Case file materials number 19, recorded by the security system of SIRCAA.
Have you ever wondered if Agatha is even human?
Quiet. It's better not to ask such questions here.
No, think for yourself. She reacts faster than the analytical departments, and often asks questions that would take us weeks to reach ourselves.
Dude, this can be explained by access to classified data.
But to understand such data, you need at least a doctorate in physics, and she insisted on changing a parameter that turned out to be key, although at that time everyone considered it secondary. People do not see the zone holistically, but she does, and she's never even been there.
So what? Do you suspect that she's not human?
It's difficult to say, but I understand one thing for sure. She is not just a supervisor from the regulatory board. She is someone or something much more, and SIRCAA is just a tool for some grandiose purpose for her or her masters.
SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file TC6435. Call sign Sidorovich. Real name unknown. Age 55. Faction neutrals. Status trader. File opened May 1st, 2012. General identification. Sidorovich is a trader, intermediary, and informant. He constantly operates in the territory of the cordon. He is a key contact figure for novice stalkers and actually in charge of economic processes in the region. Formally does not belong to any faction, maintaining full autonomy and flexibility in choosing partners. Base location: a fortified underground bunker at the cordon. The facility combines the functions of a trading post, warehouse, command center, and protective shelter during emissions. It has a multi-level defense system and limited access, which reduces the risk of direct physical elimination. Role in the zone. Sidorovich acts as an economic hub and information filter. A significant part of the artifacts, trophies, and field data obtained by newcomers passes through him. He controls the initial entry of stalkers into the zone, forming their understanding of the rules of survival and the hierarchy of influence. Origin information. There is no exact data on Sidorovich's appearance in the zone. According to indirect evidence, he was among the first to realize the economic potential of the zone and build his own business model based on the exploitation of risk and ignorance of newcomers. Sidorovich managed to establish himself as a permanent figure, having survived numerous structural and social changes. Operational methods. His main strategy is working with newcomers, buying up artifacts and equipment at low prices, issuing high-risk tasks, manipulating information, and applying economic pressure. Cases of blackmail and deliberate concealment of critical data in order to increase profits have been recorded. Psychological portrait. Characterized by pathological greed, cynicism, and a complete lack of empathy. Considers people exclusively as resources. At the same time, demonstrates a high level of rationality, cold calculation, and resistance to stress. Not prone to impulsive decisions. Each action is subordinated to financial expediency. Trusts no one except his own system of accumulation and control. Psychologically static, does not show internal conflicts or tendencies to rethink values. Strengths. Exceptional entrepreneurship and adaptability. Has a wide network of contacts among stalkers, semi-legal suppliers, and corrupt elements of the security forces. Provides stable access to equipment and basic information for a wide range of people. Motivation and fears. His main motivation is to increase his capital, influence, and control over the region. Key fears are related to losing his business, deception by partners, and missing out on profitable deals. Interest and risk for the regulatory board. Interest is assessed as high due to Sidorovich's access to primary field information, new artifacts, and early signs of anomalous changes. He can act as an indirect source of data and an indicator of the socio-economic dynamics of the zone. At the same time, the risk level is increased. The subject is uncontrolled, loyal exclusively to financial gain, and prone to leaking information or cooperating with any party that offers better conditions. Interaction is recommended only within the framework of clearly formalized and controlled agreements. Case File Materials Number 20. Interception of negotiations between Sidorovich and Barkeep.
Barkeep, listen carefully. D4 has sank. Freedom and Duty are bickering again, and Spark is setting up active ambushes for the Ward. The icing on the cake is the restored Monolith, which is undoubtedly going to cause a stir throughout the zone. Everything in the zone is boiling again. The shooting, the factions are dragging people into battle. Couriers and patrols are disappearing. This is not chaos, it's a new market, and it's growing faster than any artifact in an anomaly. I see the situation this way. You hold the center of the zone, I control the entrance. If we synchronize the supply of weapons and ammunition, no serious detachment will move without our participation. Active combat operations allow you to raise prices without too much noise, and the war will write everything off. The demand, most importantly, will be quite stable. Over the years, a bunch of petty traders who think they can mess with God have appeared. And there are already so many traders in Rostock that it is surprising how they haven't opened an ATB there yet. In short, we will block the small channels, leaving only those that pass through us working, and in the current conditions, a bullet becomes a currency more valuable than an artifact. In this phase of the zone, people are expendable, and while they fight for ideas and territories, you and I will earn on the results and consolidate our influence.
SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file SC5224. Call sign Mavka, real name unknown. Age 27. Faction Freedom. Status Commentator of the Arena. File opened on October 11th, 2021. Start in the zone. The initial stage of Mavka's activity was marked by low efficiency and a series of failures. Stalkers did not trust her much. The dominant attitude of her environment was condescending skepticism, sometimes outright mockery. Despite this, Mavka did not stop being active, which is atypical for newcomers with such a history of failures. Role in Freedom's environment. Formally, she's an ordinary brawler and task performer, but de facto, Mavka is a factor of internal ideological tension. She demonstrates a tendency to critically reflect on the decisions of the leadership and increasingly doubts the practical fulfillment of the declarations from Freedom. Her position has not yet been formulated openly, but it already influences discussions within the faction. To reduce tension within the team, Myklukha assigned her as the commentator of the arena. Operational behavior. Acts straightforwardly, often takes on tasks that exceed her current level of training. Characterized by repeated attempts after failures, careful planning of subsequent expeditions, and gradual accumulation of experience. Psychological portrait. Purposeful, ambitious, idealistic. Does not accept mediocrity as an acceptable state. Combines two dominant attitudes, the desire for recognition and internal moral control, which constantly raises her bar of requirements. Prone to emotional exhaustion after failures, but demonstrates a high ability to recover through introspection and planning. Strengths and weaknesses. Exceptionally hardworking and persistent, has high development potential, able to motivate those around her by her own example. Principled, honest, and devoted to her own ideals. There is a gap between her level of ambition and her real skills. Has a tendency to overload and self-destruct. Intolerant towards authority that does not correspond to her internal ideas about the real freedom. There is a risk of radicalization of views. Motivation and fears. Her key motivation is the restoration of non-declarative personal will in the faction and self-realization at the maximum level. Her main fear is to become mediocre and accept compromises. Physical danger is perceived as an acceptable price for moving forward. Interest and risks for the regulatory board. Interest is assessed as average with the tendency to grow. Mavka is an indicator of internal ideological processes in Freedom and a potential catalyst for changes in the faction's environment. The risks are associated with a possible internal split, escalation of conflicts, and a transition to radical methods of action, potentially dangerous in the face of ideological transformation, when her goal can justify any means. Long-term, unobtrusive observation and analysis of the dynamics of her impact on the environment is recommended. Case File Materials Number 21. A conversation overheard between two stalkers in Rostock.
Okay, dude. Listen, tell me, honestly, it used to be a lot calmer in the zone without women, right? It's like on a ship. There are fewer problems without them.
Are you fucking serious? What century is this logic from?
Come on, man, it's not about logic. Less emotions, less stupid jerks. They went, they did, they returned.
I mean, I'd say that there are those who'd enter even the deepest shitholes of the zone without fear. Valkyries, Amazons, whatever you want to call them.
Examples. Give me some examples.
Well, Mavka, I saw her not whining after another failure, but sitting and planning the next expedition. And another, until she pulls through.
Yeah, but she fails half of the raids.
And that's why she'll survive, because she gets up after each one, and the others disappear into the bar or run away to the cordon after their first joint.
Come on, she must be stupid.
The zone loves and protects such people. I'd rather go with Mavka than a dozen so-called super soldiers who give up halfway.
SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file TC2562. Code sign General Voronin. Real name unknown. Age 55. Faction duty. Status leader of the faction. File opened on May 23, 2012. General characteristics. Voronin is a career military man, one of the ideological and organizational pillars of duty. He is in his mature age, which directly affects his leadership style and decision-making. He demonstrates both physical and psychological fatigue, but maintains a high level of self-control, strategic thinking, and authority among his subordinates. He is well versed in the internal processes of the faction, and is aware of the weakening of duty after the loss of Rostock and the decline in the reputation of the faction among stalkers and his own among his fighters. Psychological profile. An old-school idealist for whom the fight against the zone was the meaning of life. With age, the emphasis shifted. His priority became preserving the lives of his men. This made Voronin more humane, but at the same time created tension with the radically minded figures within duty, in particular with the Zulu. He is aware of his decrease in physical strength due to his age, so he does not participate in field operations. He is probably selecting and training his successor. Most painful experience. Under Voronin's command, duty gradually lost its positions in the zone. The key thing is that he was unable to hold the base in Rostock and was forced to hand it over to his key ideological opponent, freedom. Ideological position. Believes in the necessity of destroying the zone, but admits that he is personally no longer able to bring this fight to an end. Loyal to the idea of duty, not to his own government. Interest and risks for the regulatory board. Voronin is of moderate interest as a stabilizing factor in the duty environment and a potential guarantor of the predicted behavior of the faction. His pragmatism reduces the likelihood of uncontrolled escalations. At the same time, the risk is an inevitable change in leadership. Voronin's departure or death paves the way for more radical figures who may take a tough stance on the status quo of the faction and the resumption of hostilities in the zone. Monitoring of the succession process through informal channels of influence is recommended. Case file materials number 22. Seized from the duty lieutenant S.T.A.L.K.E.R.
Even before D4, it became clear that duty was no longer the same as it once was. Somehow, Freedom gathered forces and went to storm Rostock. Myklukha was able to gather a lot of people, they say, from the entire zone. We did not expect this from them. Our intelligence missed it. Voronin reacted instantly. He didn't shout, he didn't run, just short orders. Machine guns in narrow passages, snipers on high ground, the reserve to the basement. He held the defense and Rostock was our fortress. We held out. Freedom was thrown back with losses on both sides. But you know what's the worst? They retreated not with panic but with smiles. If duty had been the same as before, they wouldn't have even dared. That day both Freedom and we understood something had changed. Changed not to our advantage. And the fact that Voronin didn't dare to counterattack was a completely unpleasant surprise. Our move to the cement factory was only a matter of time.
SIRCAA Archive. Extract from personal file PP2562. Call sign Zulu. Real name unknown. Age 35. Faction duty. Status fighter. File opened on August 9th, 2012. Path in the zone. Came to the zone with the intention of fighting it as an existential threat. The massive losses among his friends increased his anger at the zone, unveiling in him uncontrollable fits of rage, which leave behind deep shame and the need for isolation. May 2012. During the breakthrough of duty units through the brain Scorcher to the center of the zone, he was part of Lieutenant Colonel Shulga's group. He played a key role in the negotiations with Freedom, during which the decision was made to grant Yanov the status of a neutral territory. Despite the agreements, further clashes between the factions led to Zulu leaving the duty group in Yanov. August 2012. Assisted Operative Degtyarev during the breakthrough from Yanov to Pripyat via the Pripyat 1 underpass. Later, he returned to duty's main base at the Rostock plant. A few days later, Zulu was recorded at the head of a large consolidated detachment that advanced towards the center of the zone. After signing the D4 agreement, he had a conflict with General Voronin. Zulu formally remained in the ranks of duty, but in fact left the faction along with other dissenting fighters. Connections and contacts. According to Zulu, he was a partner of the stalker Noah. The specific circumstances and time frame of this cooperation are unknown, which may indicate the traumatic or secret nature of their interaction. Maintains close friendly ties with the stalker Nitro, as a reminder of their interaction at Yanov. Psychological portrait. Key conflict. Righteous anger versus shame of the inner beast. Has a strong need for acceptance and a tendency to earn love through actions. Impulsive, but not toothless. Makes decisions quickly, focusing on the goal of operations. His formula: the goal is higher than the personality. First of all, one must be a soldier. Features. Strengths. Exceptional physical strength and endurance, combat reliability, ability to self-sacrifice and influence the group in a crisis, ability to act during challenges and in limited spaces. Weaknesses. Impulsiveness, risk of uncontrolled aggression, dependence on external approval, tendency to self-isolation after conflicts. Interest and risks for the regulatory board. Zulu is a valuable case of transformation under the influence of the zone and the ideology of duty, effective in combat operations and crisis negotiations. Constant psychological monitoring, a strict command framework, and restrictions on autonomous decisions outside of clearly defined tasks are recommended. Case file materials number 23, taken from the duty sergeant Brome.
Voronin again saying Zulu, where a normal commander will not send people. The most dangerous sector, the most reliable fighter is needed. There are no other options. I already know this formulation by heart, and each time there is one name behind them. Zulu. I am not a fool. I understand that he is strong, but he will withstand what others will fall to in 5 minutes. But there is a line between missing a resource and purposefully erasing a person. Sometimes it seemed to me that Voronin crossed that line long ago. And what about Zulu? He is silent. He nodded, checked his equipment and left, as if it were a regular patrol, not even an expedition to the Iron Forest. Even experienced one don't stay there longer than necessary. There are anomalies everywhere. Mutants are almost crawling onto the ground. And he still looks known what is there now after the latest emissions. And here I sit and think, is this really service to duty? Or a convenient way to get rid of someone who takes on too much? Zulu is not an ideologist, but people listen to him. They respect him. Perhaps even more than some commanders.
SIRCAA Archive, excerpt from personal file TC5444. Call sign Myklukha, real name unknown, age 40, faction Freedom, status leader of the faction, file opened August 23, 2012. Origin and path in the zone. Before appearing in the zone in 2011, Myklukha was a wanted businessman in the mainland. Thanks to his entrepreneurial thinking and ability to work with people, Myklukha quickly became useful to the leader of Freedom, Chekhov, and joined the faction. Already at an early stage, he demonstrated not only managerial abilities, but also sufficient combat potential, which allowed him not to look like an office leader. Activities in the zone. Myklukha's greatest fame came from the operation to break through the brain Scorcher before it was disabled by Strelok. He went there with a small detachment with an unclear task related to the ability to control the appearance of anomalies. He managed to penetrate the barrier and hold out there for more than a month. At the time of the raid, information about it was not spread, and only after the brain Scorcher was disabled, when the first detachments of stalkers began to enter the depths of the zone, did information about the raid reach the community. This episode cemented for Myklukha the reputation not only as a cunning organizer, but also as a field commander capable of operating in extreme conditions. Returning from the barrier in the fall of 2012, Myklukha claims that he had contact with MDST, and possibly even with the representative himself beyond the barrier, and that the knowledge he gained changed his understanding of the processes in the zone. An attempt to convince Lukash ended in a conflict between them, after which Lukash disappeared, and Myklukha became the leader of Freedom. In the winter of 2013, Myklukha moved to open confrontation with duty, carrying out an attack on Rostock. Although the assault failed, it turned out to be successful in political terms, showing superiority in military initiative and consolidating Myklukha's authority as the leader of Freedom. After the signing of D4 and Freedom's move to Rostock, Myklukha implemented one of his most successful projects, the introduction of the zone's new currency, coupons. Over time, coupons have become not only a means of payment, but also an instrument of political pressure, thanks to which Myklukha gains leverage even over formerly independent groups. Psychological portrait. Myklukha is a charismatic strategist and master of social engineering, known for his ability to manipulate people. He is pleasant to talk to, attentive to details, and quickly arouses affection for himself, but behind this external ease lies a cold, pragmatic calculation. His thinking is built on assessing the benefit. He instantly converts the potential of the interlocutor into a possible benefit for himself. Myklukha perceives people not as individuals, but as a resource that can be used, bought, replaced, are written off without unnecessary sentimentality. His key aspiration is the constant increase in power and control over the situation. He subtly senses the changing balance of power, quickly orients himself in the unstable conditions of the zone, and knows how to act in advance. Gaslighting and indirect manipulation are his main tools of influence, and he uses them so subtly that the objects of influence often do not realize that they are being used. An interesting feature: despite his allergy to cats, Myklukha is an avid cat lover, particularly fond of tricolor cats. Interest and risks for the regulatory board. Myklukha is of high operational interest as an autonomous political player, capable of influencing the economy, ideology and balance of power in the zone. His experience in creating an alternative economic system makes him a valuable ally, but at the same time an extremely dangerous partner. He does not demonstrate stable loyalty and is prone to double dealing. The main risk is that Myklukha is capable of destabilizing the region by indirect methods, through economic pressure, manipulation of factions, and control over conflicts. It is recommended to consider Myklukha not as a potential ally, but as an independent force. Case File Materials Number 24, seized from a freedom fighter.
March 20th, 2012. We passed the first observation post of the Monolithians. The sea ringing was beating in my head. Two of our group stopped, began to mutter incomprehensible phrases. Their eyes were empty. We tried to bring the guys to their senses, but it was too late. They turned into zombies. Myklukha ordered to finish them off without noise, and added, "The resource is lost." March 23rd, 2012. We got to some X laboratory. The number was erased, the signs were peeled off. Inside there are mutants that I had not even heard of in fairy tales. Not just ugly, wrong, as they were assembled in a hurry, without instructions. It's good that they are sitting in flasks. March 24th, 2012. The zone has gone crazy. Anomalies formed at the exit of the laboratory. We're locked inside, and Myklukha is calm. He doesn't explain anything, and that scares me more than the anomalies. March 26th, 2012. Myklukha forbade us from entering one of the wings of the laboratory. Categorically, he goes there himself and comes back more focused each time. I heard him mumble something about agreements, about the other side, about some MDST, and someone's representative or something like that. He definitely knows more than he's telling us. March 29th, 2012. Myklukha pulled one of the monsters from the flask into the closed wing, and the anomalies began to fade. The passage opened. May 18th, 2012. We were gone for almost a month. I don't understand how this could have happened. It seems like we were gone for a week, and we had the same amount of provisions. I don't understand.
SIRCAA Archive, Section CS-2106. General Information. The Ward is a paramilitary faction that actually performs the functions of the zone's police. Since its inception, the level of open armed conflicts between factions has significantly decreased, but this is more of a side effect than the main goal of its activities. The Ward's real task is to protect SIRCAA, its personnel, research facilities, and related infrastructure. The faction acts as a forceful instrument to ensure stability in the interests of science and state control over the zone. Political status and relations with groups. After signing the D4 Treaty, the Ward maintains neutral relations with most of the zone's factions, acting as an arbitrator and a deterrent. The exceptions are S.T.A.L.K.E.R, which is waging a partisan struggle, and Monolith. The Ward maintains neutrality due to its superior force. Recruitment and personnel policy. The ward's personnel is formed from contract soldiers from the mainland, military personnel, and stalkers from other factions. The ward attracts, with its stable support, discipline, clear hierarchy and conditions of service, which are considered to be among the best in the zone. At the same time, an insufficient level of verification of the reliability of personnel was revealed, as some of the ward's commanders turned out to be sleeper agents of the Monolith. Basing and infrastructure. The ward's main base is located on the territory of the chemical plant and serves as a command, logistics and defense center. Previously, the faction also maintained the Icarus base in Zaton and also had a permanent presence in SIRCAA. After the incident at the X-11 laboratory, the ward was forced to leave secondary bases and withdraw its main forces to the chemical plant, focusing on defense and reorganization. Command. The ward's commander is Colonel Korshunov. He views the ward not as a stalker faction, but as a fully fledged power structure that must operate according to military standards, even in the chaotic conditions of the zone. Current status. After the events related to X-11, the ward is focused on concentrating forces and reviewing tactics. Despite the loss of part of the infrastructure, the faction retains the status of one of the most influential and dangerous forces in the zone. Case file materials number 25, intercepted from the Bandits' radio conversations.
Cordova, are you alive over there? Or has the ward shaken everything out already?
Alive but angry. Since the war took over the slag heap, it hasn't gotten any quieter.
But how much quieter over there? Garbage is now like a passageway. Patrols are roaming around, one after the other.
I mean, yesterday was a circus. They stopped me, backpack on ground, show your weapon. They almost got in my pants.
They checked my shoes today. They said, take them off. Soon the truants will be doing the same thing.
And the worst thing is, there's no order anymore. They just tighten the screws. Now I can't breathe.
When Nestor was boss, everything was clear in terms of concepts. He knew who to bring and where to go. And now, tokens, protocols. Slag heap, damn it. I thought it was a quiet haven for the equal guys. But it turned out to be a beacon for inspections.
SIRCAA Archive, section PP 4646. General characteristics. S.T.A.L.K.E.R is a partisan faction of scientific intelligence, closely associated with STC Malachite. The faction grew out of a small scientific and operational research group of stalkers, who from the very beginning were not focused on controlling territories, but on collecting data, field experiments, and analyzing the hidden heritage of the zone. Their goal is to study the properties and mechanisms of the zone, as well as search and systemize information about the activities of the laboratories of Project X. Origin and formation. The basis of S.T.A.L.K.E.R was Topol's Stalker group, which, after a series of successful studies in the vicinity of the Jupiter plant, received the status of an official scientific and operational group. It was from this moment that the faction ceased to be a purely expeditionary unit and transformed into an autonomous structure with its own goals and methods. In 2013, the faction set up its base at the chemical plant. Conflict with the ward. The turning point in the history of S.T.A.L.K.E.R was the arrival of the ward at the chemical plant. Colonel Korshunov issued an ultimatum. The faction members had to leave the territory within 15 minutes. Those who failed to comply with the order were eliminated, including most of the original members of Topol's group. It was from this incident that the open and irreconcilable confrontation between S.T.A.L.K.E.R and the ward began. The destruction of the ward became one of the faction's long-term goals. Relations with factions. S.T.A.L.K.E.R tries to maintain neutrality with most of the zone's factions, avoiding open conflicts if this does not interfere with the fulfillment of research tasks. The closest cooperation is maintained with scientists. Small groups of S.T.A.L.K.E members are constantly at the facilities of STC Malachite, and its leader, Professor Ozerski, provides the faction with equipment and resources. Cooperation with Noon has been recorded. The leaders of both factions, Scar and Strider, organized meetings. Tactics and methods. S.T.A.L.K.E became the first faction in the zone to systematically apply guerrilla methods of operation. Their units avoid long-term holding of territories, constantly move between temporary shelters, and operate in small mobile groups. According to a technician nicknamed Power Plug, the faction fundamentally does not have a main base, which greatly complicates its detection and elimination. Recorded hideouts: sawmill, forestry, depot of the Rostock plant. Current state. At the moment, S.T.A.L.K.E remains a small but highly qualified faction with deep expertise in zone issues. Despite significant losses, the faction has retained its combat capability and continues to operate in the shadows, considering the ward as the main threat and priority target. Case file materials number 26, recovered from a S.T.A.L.K.E stalker.
When I first got to S.T.A.L.K.E, they didn't ask me how much loot I brought, but what I saw. And then it became clear to me that this is a completely different zone. Before, everything was simple and dirty. You run around doing Sidorovich's tasks, drag artifacts, and he looks at you like an expendable material. The risk is yours. The benefit is his. If you survive, it's good. If you don't survive, well, there will be another one. But everything is different in S.T.A.L.K.E. Here they listen to you. The scientists work together with you. We plan expeditions, we discuss measurements, routes, and the behavior of anomalies. You understand why you're going to the zone and not just following orders. And when you return from an expedition, they don't chase you to the counter. They lead you to a table, pour you tea, and ask what you saw and how the sortie went. And yes, it's hard here. Constant movement, hiding places, cold and dirt. You feel the zone as a complex, living system, but when you know that your data saves others and changes the rules of the game, it is worth more than any coupons. I will no longer turn to Sidorovich. I work with people who care not about how much you brought, but what you understood.
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC 5554. General description. The Monolith faction is one of the oldest and most dangerous forces in the zone. It was formed from stalkers who believed in the existence of the mysterious Monolith crystal, which was supposedly capable of granting wishes. At an early stage of its existence, the faction declared itself as the defender of the zone from those seeking easy profit, as well as those who sought to find the monolith itself in the center of the zone. Origin and transformation. On the eve of the super emission, most of the monolith fighters went deep into the zone, bypassing the brain Scorcher in order to reach the center. After that, the faction disappeared from sight for a long time. Over time, stalkers began to record the appearance of aggressive, closed groups that did not enter into negotiations and attacked everyone without exception. It later became known that the reason for this transformation was the intervention of C-consciousness scientists. The fighters of the Monolith faction were zombified and turned into a controlled tool for protecting the approaches to the CNPP and the C-consciousness laboratories in the center of the zone. Ideology and beliefs. Members of the faction demonstrate fanatical devotion to the Monolith, which they consider to be a divine manifestation of the zone's will. Worship of the Monolith is mandatory for all fighters. It is widely believed that the zone is a living entity, and the Monolithians themselves are its chosen defenders. They are taciturn, avoid contact and compromise, and do not react to Psi radiation and emissions. Other stalkers usually avoid meeting them, considering them fanatics. The Monolithians are known for building hyperboloid structures from scrap materials that function as idols, and at the same time transmitting antennas. The faction does not support alliances with other forces of the zone, but is neutral towards zombified stalkers, considering them converts. The rest are considered infidels meant to be destroyed. Chronology of activity. In 2011, before the Clear Sky campaign to the CNPP, the faction controlled part of Limansk, the abandoned hospital, and the CNPP itself. After these events, their positions weakened significantly, but the second Great Emission allowed the Monolith to partially regain the lost territories. In 2012, before the Brain Scorcher was turned off, the faction controlled Pripyat, Radar, and the CNPP, and attempts were also made to break through the barrier to the south. After the actions of Strelok and the destruction of Sea Consciousness, the faction weakened significantly. The fighters gradually began to move away from the Monolith's Psi programming. At the time of Operation Fairway, outside the CNPP, Monolith held only the eastern part of Pripyat, and the faction's number were gradually decreasing due to the loss of centralized control. State of the faction after 2021. After the incident at the X-11 laboratory, the Monolith faction resumed its existence. Former fighters scattered throughout the zone began to return to their old hideouts and resume hostilities. High activity was recorded in the Lesser Zone, where the Monolithians managed to capture the Sphere and the Western Checkpoint, as well as made an attempt to capture Zalesia. The main forces of the faction were pulled to Pripyat, where they encountered organized resistance from core units. Case file materials number 27, seized from a Monolithian.
Noon is in the past. Today I witnessed how the Monolith is once again leading us on the right path. Faust called me and said that the Monolith had come to him. His will was clear. We need a shelter for our brothers, because there will be more of us. This is just the beginning, and more stalkers will see the light and come to the true faith. I told Faust about the building in the very center of Pripyat. People used to gather there for performances and meetings, even before the world saw the light of the Monolith. The building is large, with a theater and a sports hall, and in front of an open square, ideal for defense. There is no better place. Faust immediately understood. This is exactly what is needed to fulfill the will of the Monolith. I asked if we could take the beds and the mattresses from the surrounding buildings. The road to the light is long, and the brothers will need to regain their strength. Faust agreed, and said that he was glad to meet us, and that my friends and I had become part of the Brotherhood of Unity. At that moment, I felt happy. I was in my place. Together, we glorified the will of the Monolith. Before parting, Faust gave another order. In the gym, we must build an altar and hide there the equipment that a brother from the Graphite group will give us. It is necessary to place an Electra artifact nearby. This is the will of the Monolith. There can be no doubt about it. When Faust was left alone, I heard him quietly talking to himself. He realized that he was no longer alone. He had a flock that needed to be taken care of and led. To those who clearly are worthy of the light and warmth of the Monolith, and those who do not recognize the true God will feel the wrath of his sons. I know it. The Monolith leads us, and we will become its shield and its punishment.
SIRCAA Archive, Section PP 5347. General information. The Scientific Research Institute of the Chernobyl Anomalous Area, SIRCAA, is a key state scientific structure responsible for the systematic study of the zone phenomenon. The institute was founded in 2012, after Strelok transferred data obtained at the CNPP and in the X laboratories to the SBU leadership. This information demonstrated the strategic importance of the zone and became a direct impetus for the creation of a separate scientific institution at the state level. Location and structure. The main complex of SIRCAA is located near Zaton. Directly under the main building of the institute is the X11 laboratory, which became the technological and scientific basis for the creation of SIRCAA. It was around it that the entire infrastructure of the institute was built. Research fields. The main activity of SIRCAA is focused on studying the nature of the zone, its anomalous phenomena and artifacts. A separate field is the analysis of the possibility of practical use of the properties of artifacts outside the zone, on the mainland. The Institute seeks not only to understand the mechanisms of their action, but also to adapt these phenomena to control the conditions. Technological developments. One of the most important developments of SIRCAA was the portable Topaz scanners created by Professor Herman. Under the leadership of Dmitro Dalin, an artifact farm operated on the territory of the Institute, where it was first possible to artificially obtain a number of known anomalous samples. In addition, SIRCAA developed a new model of exoskeleton and improved protective equipment for working in the zone. Based on the technologies from sea consciousness, Dr. Vavilov created the Institute's emission protection system. Management and internal politics. Since its founding, SIRCAA has been led by Dmitro Dalin, the son of Valentin Dalin, one of the members of the Sea Consciousness Group. Professor Herman, who devoted many years to the study of the zone, was initially skeptical of Dalin, thinking that he would perform a purely representative function, using his authority to attract funding. However, Dalin approached the management of the Institute too seriously and independently, which significantly disappointed Herman and disrupted the informal balance of influence within the organization. Security and interaction with stalkers. The security of SIRCAA is fully provided by fighters of the World faction. The territory of the Institute is closed, and stalkers are usually not allowed to enter SIRCAA facilities. The exception was Strelok, who worked at the Institute until 2017. Since then, the higher-ups considered him useful. At the same time, the commander of the ward, Colonel Korshunov, openly hated Strelok. The conflict ended with the sabotage that Strelok staged in X11, and his subsequent disappearance. Work methodology and scientific conflicts. Scientists of SIRCAA mainly work in controlled laboratory conditions. Field trips are rarely carried out and exclusively under the protection of the ward. This approach became the cause of a protracted scientific conflict with the specialists of STC Malachite, who, on the contrary, rely on direct research of the zone in real conditions. The difference in approaches significantly affects the relationship between the two scientific centers and the distribution of influence in the scientific environment of the zone. Case File Materials Number 28, from Strelok's Voice Diaries.
I convinced myself for a long time that SIRCAA was a chance. But the further we went, the more clearly the familiar shadow of sea consciousness loomed over everything the Institute does. Dalin, this daddy's boy, is clearly following in his father's footsteps. Scanners, artifact farms, emission protection systems, exoskeletons. Every step is not about knowledge, but about control. About making the zone predictable, obedient, comfortable. They think that chaos can be confined and spirit can be written down in formulas. I've seen how it ends. The zone can't stand being on a leash. It breaks those who try to restrain it and responds in a way that will leave you scratching your heads for decades. They build shields and call it security. But each of their shields is another attempt to tell the zone what to be. And the zone is not a territory or a resource. It is a state. Alive, dangerous, but honest in its cruelty. What this stubborn Korshunov and his young genius want to do is just another way to make things worse. The zone doesn't need a new shepherd. It needs peace. Let it breathe as it can. Let it be wild, but real. I know what she really wants.
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC 3524. General Characteristics. Duty is a paramilitary stalker faction with a clear hierarchy and a strict military charter. Its members live by the principles of discipline, subordination, and unconditional execution of orders. The ideology of the faction is based on the belief that the zone is an existential threat to humanity. It must be contained and cleaned up, and ideally, completely destroyed. This is the only faction engaged in the systematic and targeted extermination of mutants. Ideology and worldview. Members of Duty perceive the zone as an enemy, and any attempts to coexist with it as a dangerous illusion. They oppose themselves to the anarchic ideas of freedom, considering their attitude in the conditions of the zone a manifestation of irresponsibility. For the fighters of the faction, the goal is always more important than the individual, and sacrifices are the inevitable price for the safety of humanity. Economy and supply. Duty fundamentally has no dealings with the zone traders. All artifacts obtained during raids are given to scientists, and in return the faction receives weapons, ammunition, and equipment. Unofficially, Duty is also provided with weapons and supplies from the military. At the same time, numerous cases of abuse are known. Individual ensigns of the faction stole property for their own profit, which was often used by the formal opponents of Duty, mercenaries and bandits. Relations with other factions. The main ideological enemy of Duty remains freedom, although since 2012 the confrontation between the factions has entered a colder phase. Bandits, mercenaries, and the Monolith are also considered enemies. Duty maintains neutral relations with ordinary stalkers. They operate a regime of neutrality and periodic cooperation with the military. After the appearance of the Ward, the faction established allied relations with it. Previously, Duty was actively involved in protecting mobile bases of scientists. History and key events. The faction was founded in 2006, shortly after the second disaster. It was created by former military captain Tachenko, together with a group of soldiers who survived the zone and did not want to return to the mainland. Tachenko took the title of General of Duty. In August 2011, the faction actively participated in the faction wars. Due to a serious threat from mutants from the Agroprom underground, General Krylov, who at the time led the faction, decided to move the main base to the Rostock plant. In parallel, part of the forces was directed to the operation to capture Limansk. In May 2012, despite the ongoing confrontation with freedom, the conflict entered a more restrained phase. At the same time, a detachment led by S.T.A.L.K.E.R tried to eliminate the freedom leader at the army warehouses. In August 2012, A duty detachment under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Shulga arrived at the Yanov station, where it was forced to conclude a local neutrality with the Freedom Detachment for a peaceful coexistence in the vicinity of the Jupiter plant. In the spring of 2013, after signing the D4 treaty, the faction moved to the cement factory. This caused an informal split in the ranks of duty, as not all fighters accepted the new status. Despite internal conflicts, the faction allocated its people to participate in Operation Zenith. Current status: duty remains an influential force in the zone, internally tense but devoted to its goal, to fight the zone at any cost. Case file materials number 29, intercepted from a conversation between dutiers.
Listen, Warrant Officer, I will speak slowly and clearly now so that nothing gets lost in your head. Yesterday, you issued my unit with a quote-unquote assault kit. According to the invoice, new, in fact. If you fall in this armor, you will not die from a bullet, but from shame. My fighters in it look like civilians who were accidentally driven into the zone. Let's move on to the weapons. I don't know where you kept them, but the bolts of 2 of the assault rifles behave as if they had served their military service and are about to be discharged. If even one of them jams again, I will register it and you as long as traitors and saboteurs. The size of the equipment is a whole other story, a funeral one. I have a combat unit, not a carnival. One soldier is wearing a helmet like he's in a tin can. The other is like he was outfitted in a children's ward. If Freedom sees us, they will think it's a psychological attack. Now, to the point. If by tomorrow morning my people don't receive a complete set, serviceable, and of the right size, I will officially report that the task is impossible to complete due to the failures of the logistics team. And unofficially, I'll start living in your warehouse with checks, with descriptions, with acts, with stuff they can use to make fortifications. And therefore, I propose a simple and beneficial option for everyone. You suddenly find the gear we need, and I suddenly forget what I saw today. Everyone remains alive, healthy, and in their positions.
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC-2549. General characteristics. Freedom is an anarchist stalker group, the basis of which is free stalkers. The main goal of the faction is to preserve the zone as a free territory and to resist any attempts to establish centralized control or a monopoly of power over it. The internal structure is based on the voluntary subordination and authority of experienced stalkers. Despite the absence of a strict hierarchy, when performing combat or research tasks, all fighters are obliged to listen to a senior in rank or a squad commander. Ideology and activities. The fighters of freedom are convinced that the zone cannot be destroyed, and attempts to do so will only worsen the situation. In their opinion, it is necessary to coexist with the zone, study it, and accept it as a new reality. The faction opposes the militarization of the zone and its isolation from the rest of the world. Freedom believes that humanity on the mainland should know the truth about the zone, its nature and origin, even if this truth is dangerous. Relations with other factions. Freedom is in open conflict with duty, whose ideology is directly opposite. This confrontation is considered the largest and longest in the zone. The faction is on hostile relations with the military and the Monolith. Freedom maintains neutrality with the Ward and Lone Stalkers. Also, despite numerous clashes with mercenaries and bandits, it officially declares a neutral position towards them. History and key events. The faction was founded in 2010 by a stalker nicknamed Chekhov. Its first base was a factory in the Dark Valley, from where Freedom began to expand its influence. 2011, Freedom was involved in the faction wars and first clashed with a mercenary organization. After that, Chekhov decided to move the base closer to the zone's center, kicking the military out from the warehouses. The faction also began fighting for Limansk. Spring 2012, a detachment under the command of Myklukha went to the zone's center through the Brain Scorcher with an unspecified goal. Chekhov left the zone and handed over leadership to Lukash. In June 2012, Freedom held the barrier, holding back the Monolith detachments. After the Brain Scorcher was disabled, they tried to gain a foothold in Pripyat, engaging in battles with the Monolith, the military, and duty. August 2012, Loki's detachment reached Yanov Station, where local neutrality was later established with duty units. Autumn 2012. As a result of an internal conflict, Lukash disappeared, and leadership of the faction was passed to Myklukha. In the winter of 2013, Myklukha attempted to storm duty's base at the Rostock plant. In the spring of 2013, after signing the D4 treaty, Freedom moved their base to the Rostock plant and allocated some fighters to participate in Operation Zenith. Current status. As of 2021, Freedom remains the richest faction in the zone, attracting a large number of new stalkers to its ranks, despite the high risks and constant conflicts. Case file materials number 30, overheard from a conversation between freedom fighters.
Brother, do you remember how we lived under Lukash? Fewer guns, less glitter, but more meaning in every moment. The idea then posed like a good jam in old speakers. Hoarse, but sincere. We didn't stand for coupons then. We breathed for freedom.
Yeah, under Lukash, freedom was all about spirit, not Iron Man. Maybe the armor wasn't top notch, and we counted the cartridges, but there was light in the heads. Everyone knew why they were here.
And with Myklukha, a different wave came. Can you feel it? The backpacks are heavier. The rations are stable, the armor is fresh. The machine guns are as clean as if it came from a shop window. They smell of grease. You don't have to think about what to fight with tomorrow.
But they also became fuller, brother, and that's a fact. You don't worry about where to get cartridges, where to find a filter. You sleep more peacefully. You live longer. The zone respects that.
But sometimes I think, man, isn't there too much fat for freedom? Isn't it starting to weigh down on our backpacks? People in the zone no longer perceive us as freedom fighters.
Calm down, brother, and as long as the heart remains free, freedom is alive, and the guns, armors, and rations are just tools, not shackles. The main thing is not to let iron command the soul.
SIRCAA Archive, section TC2253. General characteristics. Bandits are representatives of the criminal world who have come to the zone for various reasons: quick money on artifacts, arms trafficking, escaping from the law, or searching for new opportunities outside the control of the mainland. Their level of involvement ranges from petty scoundrels to experienced criminal authorities. Despite the lack of organization, bandits pose one of the main threats to neutrals. Ideology and order. Bandits live by the so-called concepts, an informal code of honor borrowed from the criminal world outside the zone. These rules regulate internal relations, the distribution of loot, and subordination to the gang. In practice, concepts are often interpreted selectively and serve as a justification for racketeering, violence, and the capture of territories. A common practice is to extort tribute from stalkers for shelter. Structure and organization. The Bandits do not have a single centralized structure. They belong to numerous gangs, from small to large, each of which headed by a kingpin or plowman. Conflicts often arise between gangs over territories, routes and sources of income, which leads to constant internal instability. Relations with other factions. The Bandits have a large number of enemies. The greatest threat to them is posed by cohesive detachments of neutrals, duty, the ward and the military. Open hostility continues with the military, although during the faction wars, cases of unofficial cooperation with corrupt representatives of the PSF were recorded. The Bandits maintain formal neutrality with Freedom. Situational neutrality or partner contacts with mercenaries are possible. Key events and groups. In 2011, a large gang led by Yoga operated in the Garbage, which controlled the intersection of stalker paths and charged a fee of passage. The situation changed after the start of hostilities between Duty and Freedom, and resistance from the group led by Father Valerian. Late 2011, early 2012, the Bandits lost control of their territories and dispersed throughout the zone in small groups. In May 2012, Borov occupied the former Freedom base at the factory and organized security at the entrance of the X-18 laboratory, but was unable to subjugate all the gangs. Later, Borov was eliminated by Strelok, and his gang ceased to exist. In the summer of 2012, after the brain Scorcher was turned off, the Sultan's gang established situational neutrality with the Stalkers in Skadovsk, and later kicked Beard out and introduced Bandit rule in Zaton. 2020, Nestor has united most of the Bandits of Garbage, organizing a base at the Slag Heap and acting as an arbitrator between the gangs. 2021, Nestor's disappearance threatened a new destabilization of the region. Active gangs are on the verge of another war for influence in Garbage. Current situation. The Bandits remain a numerous but fragmented force. Their influence is based on fear, situational alliances, and power vacuums that arise in the zone. The lack of a single leader makes them vulnerable. Case file materials number 31, taken from a Bandits PDA.
I'm telling you how it is. Without Nestor, there will be no peace in Garbage. He kept everything on concepts and did not let the kingpins gnaw at each other. Now every second one is pretending to be a plowman. And it's only a matter of time before real massacre begins. For the slag heap, for the trails, for the shelter. Blood will be shed, and who will be on the receiving end? People like us. The kingpins are fine, but we're not running around with the wolves. I don't want to get involved in these showdowns. The most sensible thing to do now is to run to Zaton and sit it out there. The place is proven. The Sultan keeps order. He doesn't touch the small ones again, unless you get under his feet. The stalkers there are relaxed. They walk with the loot on their backs and think that everything is honest. It's easy to quiet and scare them, no shooting, no noise. I went in, took what he had, and left. Skadovsk is a feeding trough for those who think with their heads. And we'll wait until a new order is established in the Garbage. And then we'll decide whether to return or not, because it's better to live longer and more satiated. But dying for someone else's interest is really not an option for me.
SIRCAA Archive, section SC5546. Origin and formation. After the shutdown of the brain Scorcher, some of the Monolithians lost faith in their deity, as sea consciousness ceased to control them. Disunited and disorganized, the former Monolith adepts turned out to be easy prey for the Zone and other factions. During this period, one of them, Strider, began to purposefully gather his former brothers in faith, trying to give them a new purpose. Ideology and internal state. Noon unites former Monolithians who are trying to find themselves after the destruction of sea consciousness and the loss of their connection with the monolith. Most of them are characterized by memory lapses, moral confusion, and loss of confidence in their own identity. Despite this, the faction maintains discipline and combat potential, remaining a notable force in the zone. Territory and status. Since 2013, Noontide has settled on Wild Island. The faction's right to this territory was additionally secured by the D4 Treaty. Leadership and internal contradictions. Formally, Noontide has no official leader, but most members considered Strider to be one. External relations. The faction declares neutrality towards other forces in the zone, but access to Wild Island is strictly limited and is allowed only in special cases. Noontide members are wary of representatives of other factions. According to available information, only the stalkers Skif and Richter were granted access to Wild Island. Scientific cooperation. A separate area of Noontide's activity was the cleaning of territories from radiation and toxins in order to restore the possibility of a safe life. For this, they collaborated with Professor Lodochka, a scientist from STC Malachite. Collapse of the faction. Attempts at peaceful existence ended after a failed experiment with the Alpha artifact in X11. As a result, all members of Noon again felt the call of the monolith and returned to its hypnotic influence. The faction effectively ceased to exist. Instead, the group of monolith sectarians was restored. Case file materials number 32, taken from a Noon member.
Sometimes I try to remember who I was before the voice appeared in my head. Not the face, I can't remember the face. Fragments come, someone else's kitchen, a table under the window, a warm light in the evening. I don't know if it's mine or if I stole these memories from someone. And it scares me more than meeting a mutant. Why did I go to the zone? Probably not because of a good life. People don't come here when everything is fine. Maybe I was running away from depths, from guilt, from emptiness? Or maybe I just wanted to disappear so that no one would look for me. The zone knows how to do that, erasing people buried in any archive. And now I sit on an island amongst rust, toxic puddles, and old containers. We call it a shelter, but sometimes it's more like a cesspool for those who didn't fit in either the zone or life outside of it. I'm thinking about the mainland, and I don't feel happy. Maybe someone is waiting for me there, or maybe not. But despite everything, I catch myself thinking that I want to remember. Not to return, but to know. I always want something. More than a weapon. Than a fanatic. Than a shadow in the zone.
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC0512. The Mobile Scientific Field Research Unit is an autonomous module for conducting scientific expeditions in the difficult and dangerous conditions of the exclusion zone. Developer Spetsprojekt Mash Research Institute. Manufacturer Mayak Plant. General characteristics. The Mobile Scientific Field Research Unit is a sealed autonomous module adapted to accommodate scientific personnel, laboratory equipment, and life support systems in conditions of increased radiation, anomalous activity, and limited access to logistics. The units are delivered by air. Since the manufacture of the first sample, the design of the mobile unit has not fundamentally changed, which indicates a successful initial engineering design that fully met the operational requirements of working in the zone. History of deployment and operation. The first unit was manufactured in 2010. After a series of tests in 2011, it was landed by helicopter in the area of Lake Yontar. From 2011 to 2015, expeditions under the leadership of Professor Sakharov worked there. The main areas of research were Psi radiation from the X-16 laboratory and the development of means of protection against it. After the shutdown of the brain Scorcher in 2012, the decision was made to deploy a second unit in the area of Yanov Station. The expedition was led by Professor Herman. The research concerned the potential medical use of anomalous materials, as well as studying the impact of anomalies on biological objects, in particular on mutants. In 2015, it was planned to create a scientific camp of 3 mobile units on the outskirts of Pripyat. Due to the construction of the boundary and direct confrontation with the core, the project was not implemented, and the camp did not actually begin fully fledged work. In 2017, one of the units was installed on Wild Island. The expedition was led by Professor Lodochka. The main research focused on the possibility of obtaining energy from toxic waste and technologies for its processing. In 2019, a mobile unit was deployed in the Lesser Zone. The senior of the expedition was Dr. Negoda, who conducted research on anomalies with the assistance of Professor Herman. Unknown and classified projects. According to indirect data, one of the units was installed on the dry cargo ship Lviv in the Zaton area. There is no official information about the time of deployment, the composition of the expedition, and the goals of the research. There is no information about this unit in the internal archive of SIRCAA. There were also isolated mentions of the use of mobile units outside the approved SIRCAA programs, in particular in connection with experimental work that was not included in the open list of research projects of the Institute. There is no confirmation or refutation of these data. Case file materials number 33, taken from the PDA of the Stalker Grey.
Zorik and I went to Yantar not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. After the emission, the artifacts glowed well, and with empty pockets, one doesn't live long in a zone. I knew it was difficult there with the sea background, but I hoped to get through quickly and without any problems. At first, the area seemed unnaturally quiet. There were no birds or mutants. Even the dosimeter was silent. And then movement appeared between the bushes. One silhouette, another, a third. Zombies. A whole pack, whose consciousness had been washed away by sea radiation to the point of bare instinct. We retreated, because there wouldn't be enough bullets to kill them anyway. But Zorik, either out of fear or by accident, lingered too long. The sea radiation also began to press on our temples. Our thoughts became confused, and we felt as if someone was rummaging through our heads. We both began to get lost between 3 pine trees. It was clear that we wouldn't last long. We found the former base of scientists almost by accident. We had almost given up hope of escaping. We saw the entrance of the old bunker at the last moment. Fortunately, the heavy iron doors locked from the inside, and we were able to shield ourselves from the zombies, who still wandered outside for a long time. We sat there until dark, until the zombies scattered around the neighborhood. Then I realized once again, in the zone, it's not those who shoot the most, but those who find shelter in time, who survive.
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC-0586, Laboratory X-18, Location Garbage, Research Field, Work on the Universal Soldier Program, Research on mutations and experimentation on genes to create mutants with extraordinary physical abilities. Basic information. This laboratory was built even before the appearance of Project X, shortly after the Chernobyl disaster, and was used to study the effects of radiation on living organisms. Later, it was re-equipped and introduced into the network of X laboratories. One of the areas of research was the study of changes in the human genome under the influence of Psi radiation. The obtained results had practical application. On their basis, the scientific and engineering staff of the laboratory developed key components and modules of the Kaimanov emitter, which were later transferred to the X16 laboratory. See case TC0790. It is known that one of the studies on the irradiation of the human genome with powerful Psi radiation resulted in the appearance of the bloodsucker. Its uncontrollability and other related problems led to the recognition of this mutant as uninteresting for the Universal Soldier project. Probably someone in the laboratory decided to continue the research on an initiative basis, instead of destroying the biomaterial. After the second disaster, some of the experimental samples got out of control and spread throughout the zone, demonstrating a high level of adaptation to the anomalous environment. Since the X18 laboratory was located in a relatively accessible and popular area among stalkers and was not properly preserved, the facility was subjected to large-scale looting. This led to almost complete loss of scientific documentation, personal reports, and research results. Case file materials number 34, from the documents of Dr. Kalugin.
Report of the laboratory staff dated February 11, 2005. During the routine inspections of subjects after radiation, several interesting specimens were discovered. Some individuals lost their obvious sexual dimorphism, and several more individuals showed signs of conditioned learning. They respond to the voice of one of the laboratory assistants and ignore the voices of others. The reasons for this phenomenon have not been established. It is likely that psi radiation forms primitive associative bonds. Laboratory staff report dated May 11, 2005. Further processing of the samples led to the evolution of the species in the direction of extreme camouflage. This may be quite useful for further development of the project. Unfortunately, a complete loss of control over most of the individuals was recorded. Even with the help of Professor Dvupalov's leash, Dr. Hlinka is the only one who can still maintain contact with them. Final report, dated April 3, 2006. Based on the decision of the Council, further work on project number 132 was stopped due to its unpromising nature. The objects are poorly controllable, the level of aggressiveness of the samples is too high, the hematological method of nutrition was recognized as irrational. Resolution: destroy the biological samples, close the project.
After the second explosion at the CNPP, we locked ourselves on the lower level, behind the hermetic doors. We hope that evacuation is near. While these doors are still holding back the influx of subjects that escaped from the cages, I am most afraid of the subjects from project number 132. Damn Hlinka could not destroy the results of his work. They drank the blood from him, and he naively hoped for the sympathy of the mutants.
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC0790, Laboratory X16. Location: Yontar. Research field: study of Psi radiation, practical implementation of the operation of devices based on Kaimanov emitters. Basic information. The laboratory was created to further study part of the research results of the X18 laboratory. For details, see case TC0586. By additionally expanding the underground bomb shelter of the factory near Lake Yontar, both a room of the required size and visual cover for the entrance to the laboratory were obtained. Based on the research from X19, see case SC1004 for more details, scientists led by Professor Prikodko Pavel Stepanovich created the Ya-1M installation, which the stalkers later called Brain in a Flask. This installation was a source of powerful wide-spectrum Psi radiation and required significant cooling for stable operation. It has not yet been established whether this installation had its own consciousness, but there is indirect evidence that it was used to calculate certain data. Prisoners were involved in research into the effects of the Ya-1M installation on humans, some of whom mutated and developed Psi skills during the irradiation process. At the same time, a deterioration in the cognitive abilities of the test subjects was recorded. Such mutants, the results of experiments, continued to be studied on site and were also sent to the X5 laboratory. See Archive Data Section TC0686. There were also attempts to synchronize the operation of the Ya-1M installation with the Psi organisms from X-19, but there is no evidence of success in this direction. After the second disaster, the experimental samples left the laboratory, and the personnel probably suffered a powerful Psi effect and subsequently died. The Ya-1M, without proper control and cooling, began to emit powerful Psi radiation, which even reached the surface and negatively affected all living things near the plant. According to Professor Sakharov, this effect was not only mental, but also physical, which led to the mutations of some stalkers and soldiers into snorks. After the installation was turned off by Strelok, the level of Psi effect on the territory of the plant dropped significantly, but did not disappear completely. Now the entrance of the laboratory is blocked, and due to the powerful Psi radiation, there is no way to resume the work of the laboratory without threatening the Institute's personnel. Case File Materials Number 35, from Professor Stepanovich's diary.
In recent months, I have been closely monitoring the work of X-18, formally, without comments, but I increasingly return to the same records. The facility's infrastructure is clearly not designed for the current load, especially in view of the experiments with Dr. Kaimanov's emitter elements. Peak Psi background values remain unstable. The protective circuits of X-18 do not always withstand them equally, and although excesses are short-lived, they are repeated too often. The recorded side effects are not critical yet, but they tend to accumulate. Personnel orientation failures, background Psi resonances, accelerated wear of measuring instruments. Some of the data have to be checked again, not because of the methodology, but because of the conditions. A separate problem there is the cooling system. It operates close to the upper limits, which has already led to emergency stops and loss of materials. I do not undertake to evaluate the management decisions of X-18, but I take these factors into account in my own calculations. The situation is different here at X-16. The design involved long-term work with broad-spectrum Psi sources, and the team has practical experience in precisely such conditions. This allows us to not be distracted by stabilizing the environment, and to focus on the results. The biological objects are demonstrating increasingly interesting reactions to the Psi fields. For now, I am limiting myself to recording observations, but sometimes I get the feeling that we are dealing with something more coherent than just a response to the impact. No, I had no reason to refuse them to move to our laboratory. I need to write to Dr. Kalugin.
SIRCAA Archive, Section SCO-890. Laboratory X3, Location Cordon. Purpose: research into the effects of Psi radiation on living organisms, in particular the cultivation of Psi embryos, artificially bred embryos based on the genetic material of farm animals. Basic information: X3 is one of the oldest laboratories from Project X. The successes of scientists allowed to obtain creatures capable of accumulating, processing, controlling, and projecting Psi energy. Based on the developments of X3, mutants with Psi abilities were created in laboratories X18, see Archive Data Section TC0586, and X5, see Archive Data Section TC0686, the Psi Dog, the Controller, the Bureau, and the Poltergeist. At a certain stage of the work, the Oasis research site was opened. In test mode, it was used to model and inspire a positive mindset and to calm down. Features: the ISV-3 incubator provided the cultivation of organisms with psi abilities, which became a key stage in the creation of controlling and combat mutants for other programs of Project X. After the second disaster, the laboratory was preserved. Part of the documentation was evacuated due to its close location to the edge of the zone. Despite this, the exact location of the laboratory was lost. Case file materials number 36, intercepted from Sidorovich's negotiations.
I'll tell you this quietly, away from unnecessary ears. I have one piece of information, a tidbit, if you approach it wisely. In the cordon, imagine there is an oasis. Not a bar fairy tale, not a figment of the rookie's imagination. A real place. There, the zone seems to be exhaling. There are no anomalies. Radiation is absent. And you stand there as if not in the zone, but somewhere at home. Of course, I myself am not going to take anyone there. I'm not a philanthropist. But think about it. Stalkers will pay just to see such a place, and scientists even more so. The idea is as simple as a crowbar. We sell tickets. Not pieces of paper, of course, but information and a route. If you want, just coordinates. If you want, with a guide. Security and a guarantee of return. To go there, one price. To go back, another. There is always a risk, and as you know, you pay for the risk separately. Most importantly, you keep your mouth shut. Don't shout about such a place. The less they know, the longer it lasts. And for me, you know, I want the product to be rare and the demand to be stable. The Oasis is just one of those.
SIRCAA Archive, Section SC08-95. Laboratory X11. Location, SIRCAA District. Purpose: Laboratory X11 served as a backup facility for X7 and was created as a separate test and debugging platform. Its main purpose was to conduct test runs on systems, debug equipment, and secure a remote connection to X7 without direct involvement of the generators. Basic information. While working on the generators project, scientists Lebedev and Kaloncha came to the conclusion that using the main complex for high-risk experiments was impractical. This was the basis for creating X11 as an isolated laboratory capable of simulating the operation of key systems and monitoring their behavior under load. During experiments on connecting to the noosphere, X11 served as a remote observation point, collecting telemetry and monitoring the stability of systems. Additionally, the laboratory was used as a storage facility for mutant samples delivered from other X laboratories. Due to its integration into a single network of X laboratories connected to the generators and the preservation of the laboratory in a relatively operational state after the second disaster, the area above the laboratory was selected for the construction of the Scientific Institute for Research of the Chernobyl Anomalous Area. In 2021, as a result of a failure during an experiment with the Alpha artifact, X11 suffered critical damage. The anomalous emission led to significant destruction of both the underground complex and the Institute's infrastructure. After the incident, all work was stopped, and the facility was declared unfit for further operation. Case file materials number 37, from Dr. Sirota's notes.
X11 continues to make an ambiguous impression. As an autonomous facility, it was surprisingly well preserved. Power, some communications, local computing nodes. All this allows for limited experiments to be conducted without immediate risk to personnel. However, the deeper you dwell into its architecture, the more obvious the main thing becomes. This laboratory was never intended to be self-sufficient. No, this is not a laboratory, it's a node. Without active connection to the entire X network, most of its potential is dormant. We only see a shadow of what it could have been. Individual subsystems directly indicate missing elements. Protocols await response from other laboratories. Event logs break off at stages where control transfer was supposed to take place. And simulation modules do not go beyond the previous run. Restoring just X11 yields interesting results from the perspective of the project's history, but it does not reveal its essence. The conclusion suggests itself, although it sounds dangerous. To unlock the full potential of X11, it is necessary to restore the X network as a system, or at least its key nodes. Only then will the laboratory cease to be a museum of past ambition and become a tool again. It seems that such thoughts occur not only to me, but also to Dalin, which raises positive expectations.
SIRCAA Archive, Section SC0700, Laboratory X17, Location STC Malachite. Basic information and purpose. Laboratory X17 was created to study the noosphere and develop technologies for direct interaction with it. The laboratory specialized in experimental methods for reading, interpreting, and visualizing information structures associated with the consciousness of living beings. The main direction of work at X17 was the development of the visiograph, a unique device designed for direct access to the noosphere. After confirming the existence of the noosphere in 1995, scientists came to the conclusion that information about the consciousness of all living beings is stored in a specific layer of the so-called subtle matter. Within the framework of the C consciousness program, the visiograph was considered an emergency and at the same time experimental means of unloading consciousness from this environment. The X17 laboratory is located under the industrial site where the Malachite Research Center was later organized. Despite the fact that X17 survived the second disaster without critical structural damage, a significant part of the technical and scientific documentation was lost or destroyed. This significantly complicated the subsequent reconstruction of the full picture of the research and the true potential of the visiograph. Case file materials number 38, taken from a diary of a Spark stalker.
Look, when the scientists and I first came across that industrial site, it looked dead. Dead and abandoned. Rusty frames of workshops, overturned equipment, dirt everywhere. For me, it was just another place. There are dozens of such in the zone, but the scientists came to life almost immediately. They quickly realized that the complex had a good location, solid construction, and was ideally suited for creating a fully fledged scientific center. Back then, it was still hard to believe that STC Malachite would appear here. During a more detailed examination, however, we went down to the basement, and it was there that I felt that something was wrong. These basements were too different from ordinary factory ones. Thick walls, hermetic doors, strange cable routes that went deeper underground, niches for complex equipment. I immediately understood that this was not just an industrial complex, but the remains of one of the X laboratories, and the scientists, well, they quickly came to the same conclusion. But the joy of this discovery was overshadowed by one thing: no documentation whatsoever. All the archives had either been taken out or destroyed before we arrived. I tried to find out the laboratory number by characteristic signs, but no dice. But something else became clear. This place had once served the great science of the zone, and perhaps that's why the scientists so confidently decided to make it their new home.
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC0686, Laboratory X5. Location Chemical Plant Area, under the Agroprom Research Institute complex. Research fields. Before the 2006 disaster, the laboratory worked on the Leash project under the leadership of Professor Dvupalov. After the formation of the Anomalous Zone, C Consciousness changed its priorities to the Controller project, the goal of which was to create human samples with biological and technological modifications, potential super soldiers capable of connecting to the Monolith network. After creating 18 prototypes, the experiments were successful, and Faust appeared. Structure and functions. X5 was an underground extension of the Agroprom Research Institute, which officially studied the effects of radiation on plants and the possibility of growing clean products on contaminated soils, and unofficially, the effect on the consciousness of living beings. The laboratory also served as one of the main communication nodes between the laboratories of Project X. History and status. In 2003, the Agroprom Research Institute was headed by Pavlo Striz, a member of C Consciousness. X5 functioned for some time after the second disaster. The absence of the main part of the scientific equipment indicates the probable evacuation of the laboratory. In 2011, the lower levels of the laboratory were flooded, completely disabling access to some of the premises. Case file materials number 39, from the notes of Dr. Sukhom Linsky.
March 21st, 2002. Prototype 8 once again confirmed the instability of the chosen implantation scheme. Lethality exceeds permissible limits. No telekinetic manifestations were recorded in the surviving samples. Instead, uncontrolled acts of self-harm are observed that do not correlate with external stimuli. There is a suspicion that the subject is aware of its own condition, and it's trying to put an end to it. April 11th, 2002. Prototype 11 was officially declared unsuccessful at the stage of theoretical modeling. Further practical work is prohibited. The documentation was transferred to the lower-level archive. Unofficially, it can be used as a negative standard for training junior personnel. May 5th, 2002. Today, I had an unpleasant conversation with Professor Chubko. He's again obstructing authorized access to the documentation on the work with the suppressor. He has obvious signs of paranoia. August 22nd, 2004. Professor Dvupalov's work with his leader gives great results. The experiment conducted on Prototype 22 showed excellent results in controlling the test subjects. Even at a distance of 1 kilometer, the effects remained guaranteed. The sample was recognized as unrepresentative due to the use of one type of test subject. A request for permission to expand the experiment has been submitted.
SIRCAA Archive, Section CN0570. Over the Horizon Radar Station Duga. Military Index 5N32. Location and purpose. The Over-the-Horizon Radar Station was originally created as an element of the early detection system for intercontinental ballistic missile launches. Located near the Chernobyl 2 military base, the complex's antenna was the largest structure in the region even before the 1986 accident, and from the very beginning had the status of a top-secret military facility. In parallel with its official purpose, Duga was considered a promising platform for unconventional research. Scientists from the Radio Wave Research Institute in Limansk carried out work on adapting the antenna complex for receiving and emitting psi signals. For this purpose, a smaller experimental copy of the antenna was built near the institute, on which regimes dangerous for use at the main facility were practiced. Basic information. After the first disaster, interest in the Duga increased sharply. The discovery of a network of X-laboratories in the zone gave grounds to consider the station one of the key elements of the infrastructure of Project X, capable of providing large-scale psi influence. It was on the basis of the developments regarding the Duga that the aggression suppression device Rainbow, better known as the Brain Scorcher, was later created. After the formation of the Anomalous Zone, The station at some point began to be used as the main antenna for PDA communication. Case file materials number 40, taken from a Stalker's PDA.
I looked at the Duga from afar for a long time. It towered over the zone like a rusty ridge, and everyone knew climbing there was a bad idea. But that was exactly what drew me in. I waited for the moment when the guards were busy with something else, and, staying in the shadows, I reached the supports. When I touched the cold metal, fear disappeared. Only a strange delight remained. It was difficult to climb. The stairs creaked, the wind hit my face, and there was emptiness under my feet. But the higher I climbed, the less tired I felt, as if the structure itself allowed me to go further. From above, the zone opened up in a completely different way. Pripyat and the CNPP lay below like dead spots of concrete, peeking up from behind the forest, anomalies flickering in the distance. I saw Yantar, dark swamps, and even the distant cordon. From a height, the zone did not seem hostile, only huge, indifferent, and beautiful in its own way. I left quickly, but I'll remember that view forever.
SIRCAA Archive. Extract from personal file PP6273. Call sign General Tachenko. Real name unknown. Age 45. Faction duty. Status deceased. File opened on August 8, 2012. General characteristics. General Tachenko is a former military man, member of one of the evacuation units. He broke off contact and decided to stay in the zone, organizing duty, the first Stalker faction. His authority was based not on his position, but on his personal leadership, when Tachenko's very presence instantly imposed discipline and order. He was perceived as a man of war, for whom peace was only a short pause between operations. Character traits: unyielding, tough, and prone to total control. Tachenko did not recognize compromises and half measures, considering them a manifestation of weakness. He looked at the world as a set of problems that required radical solutions, and considered himself the only one capable of bearing the burden of responsibility for them. The requirement of absolute subordination was dictated by the belief that only a rigid hierarchy ensures survival. Attitude to war and the zone. He fought not only with the specific threats, but also with the very nature of the zone, and with those who underestimate its danger. For him, the zone is not a mystery, but an enemy that must be contained at any cost. Principles and beliefs. Duty above all is not a slogan, but the basis of his worldview. Tachenko was ready to sacrifice resources, people, and even his own life for the sake of global security. It was this readiness for extreme decisions that earned him respect and fear at the same time. Current status: died in a spatial anomaly under unknown circumstances. Case file materials number 41, taken from the PDA of Duty Major Krivonos.
I entered the zone as a soldier, in the first month after it was formed. For some unknown reason, they sent us without proper maps of the area. One wrong maneuver and we were lost. There was no communication, no landmark either. When the mutants appeared, it becomes clear. They would bury us here. They were coming from all sides. We fought back, counting bullets and saving every shot. When the magazines were almost empty, I was already preparing with a knife to sell my life for highest price possible. And then organized fire started from behind the hill. Clear, cold, without fuss. The mutants were cut off as if with a blade. I saw Tachenko for the first time. Calm, collected, with the look of the man who knew what he's doing. His squad acted as a single unit. They were not saving us, They were simply doing their duty. After the battle, he said that the zone is a threat to all of humanity. Either you fight against it, or it will take everything that has any value for you. And he suggested that I join duty. I agreed. I started as a sergeant, without illusion, and with a minimal set of equipment. Years passed, I studied, survived, commanded. Now, I'm a major on duty, and every time going on a raid, I remember the day when they pulled me out of the hell and gave me the goal worth standing for until the end.
SIRCAA Archive, Section TC-1004, Laboratory X7, Location Generators. Main Research Direction. The main direction of the work of Laboratory X7 was the study of the influence of the noosphere on the human psyche and the possibilities of two-way contact with it. The central element of the research was the Agatha capsules, designed for the complete neural immersion of operators in the noospheric space. History and status. It is known that a research group consisting of scientists Lebedev, Kaloncha and Suslov was transferred here along with materials from Laboratory X8. The reasons for the transfer have not been established. After the failure of the experiment in 2006, the laboratory also became the center for neuroprogramming of C-consciousness agents under the S.T.A.L.K.E.R program. In the spring of 2012, Strelok broke into the X7 laboratory and eliminated all scientists associated with the C-consciousness group. The destruction of personnel and critical systems led to a sharp increase in noospheric instability in the generators area. Current status. The X7 laboratory is considered partially destroyed and inaccessible. At the same time, there is indirect evidence that individual systems function autonomously, and the level of noospheric influence in the area remains abnormally high, making the facility one of the most dangerous in the zone. Direct or remote access to it will allow to control the generators and anomalous energy. Case file materials number 42, from the diary of Dr. Dalin. I am starting to realize that the generators are mistakenly perceived as a separate phenomenon. Without access to X7, we see only the consequences, but not the mechanism of their work. At the same time, the laboratory cannot be connected without access to the X network. It is the key interface between human consciousness and the noospheric structures that power and stabilize the generators. It was in X7 that my father calibrated the system, and I must correct his erroneous calculations. After the loss of C-consciousness, the generators operate in a semi-autonomous mode, which explains the increase in stability and chaotic bursts of Psi radiation. Data from the periphery is late and fragmentary, so we only react, not predict. If Agatha's calculations are correct, then the colonel has a chance to stabilize the zone through the last available Agatha capsule. But all this is meaningless until we find a way to get there. SIRCAA Archive, Section SC0803, Foundation, Location Pripyat. General description. The Foundation is the central laboratory of Project X, which functions as a control and communication node for the entire X network. It is through the Foundation that the work of subordinate laboratories, Psi installations, and auxiliary objects of the network is coordinated. Current status. After the restoration of the X network, the synchronizer in the Foundation resumed its functioning. Stable Psi activity and data exchange with other network nodes are recorded. The exact location of the Foundation remains unknown due to the opposition of the Corps to scouts operating in Pripyat. Case file materials number 43, overheard at a stalker's campfire.
So it was like this. I decided with the guys to fulfill a childhood dream, to see Pripyat. We found a guide who promised to take us around the boundary and the coast patrols, but only one way. And so he says, you somehow get back on your own, I only lead one way. The guys and I scratch our noses and think, we'll solve problems as they rise. The main thing is to get there, and we'll get back somehow. So this radioactive pilot set us a course to the Red Forest, where he blindfolded us and led us somewhere, and took off the blindfolds in some tunnel with a monorail. He says, take off the blindfolds because there might be problems. I don't know what problems he was talking about, because the only problems were a pack of rodents and a pipe that Sosna hit his head into. We climbed out through some sewer hatch in a yacht in Pripyat. What can I tell you? The view of these high-rise buildings is truly mesmerizing. We froze like that old computer from realistic graphics settings. And when we thawed out, this guy disappeared, as if he had dissolved in an anomaly. To hell with him, that was the agreement. So this copper field of Chernobyl disappeared along with the hatch through which we climbed out. No matter how much we looked for the hole, we never found it. And then it dawned on Sosna. No one has been collecting artifacts here for a long time. And indeed, we just turned on the scanners and there, Joseph on the mare, they all rang in unison. I had never seen so many artifacts in my life. We filled all the containers in half an hour. People, there were so many of them that we didn't even take the cheap ones anymore. This is not Pripyat, this is a natural Klondike of artifacts. Everything would have been fine until Tarantino insisted on a tour. So he's like, guys, there must be definitely some kind of X laboratory here. We scratched our heads and couldn't think of anything better than to check the basement of the Policia Hotel. We had just gone down there when a corpse detachment surrounded us. I thought we would have a real fight here. But Rossino suddenly says, today is your lucky day, guys. I have a soldier with an injury. We need to take him to the doctor in Yaniv as soon as possible. You understand, this is an offer you can't refuse. Well, so we put the wounded man on a stretcher, and the three of us, like an Indian rickshaw, carried him all the way to the main entrance of Yaniv. At first they looked at us askance, but they saw that we were standing there breathless with empty hands, like the guys were really banging on the door. In short, we were lucky that day, even for lottery winners. We saw Pripyat, took away backpacks full of artifacts, and the corpse let us go in peace, rather than with a bullet in the head.
SIRCAA Archive, Section SC-1004, Laboratory X-19, Location CNPP, Main Research Direction. Under the leadership of Dr. Voitenko, one of the members of the C Consciousness Group, genetic research was conducted in the X-19 laboratory, aimed at studying the influence of the noosphere on the DNA structure of living organisms. During the experiments, mutational changes that arose under the influence of the anomalous energy from the noosphere were analyzed. In parallel, work was carried out to find biomechanisms capable of ensuring stable interaction of biological systems with anomalous energy. One of these directions was the creation of experimental psi-organisms that could act as carriers or conductors to the anomalous field, and at the same time be a potential link between living matter and artificial psi structures of the X network. Research results. The research conducted at X-19 became the scientific and methodological basis for the creation of the YA-1M installation in X-16. See Archive Section TC0790. The data obtained in the laboratory allowed the development of the concept of an artificial psi structure capable of processing huge data arrays of the noosphere. In the later stages of the project, it was planned to synchronize the psi organisms created in X-19 with YA-1M, which was to ensure controlled two-way exchange between living systems and the artificial psi circuit. Status. Due to its location under the CNPP, the territory is heavily contaminated with radiation and anomalous formations. There is no information about the exact location of the laboratory, which currently makes it impossible to search for it. Case file materials number 44 from the X19 Research Journal.
December 18, 2005. Today's observation is strikingly different from our previous models. The subject does not simply react to the field. It behaves as if it is built into it. The connection with the noosphere does not look passive or resonant like in previous samples. It is rather a short, intermittent dialogue. What surprised me the most is the emotional component, if you call it that. At the moment of the subject's excitement, the indicators of the environment change without the external influence. The pressure drops, the electrostatic background becomes unstable, weak anomalous fluctuations appear. When the subject calms down, everything returns to normal. The surrounding space seems to adjust to its state. The most interesting thing was the fixation on the feeling of the presence of intention. The subject is not yet aware of this connection, but the noosphere is already clearly reacting as if recognizing a new interlocutor. If this connection stabilizes, the point will not be whether it will influence the environment. The question is, how far can this influence reach?
SIRCAA Archive, section SC1905. The Alpha artifact is the first known artifact of anomalous origin in the world. It was first obtained in 1995 during the first Caribbean experiment, long before the formation of the Anomalous Zone. After its discovery, the artifact was involved in research within the framework of Project X as a potential source of a new type of anomalous energy. During the experiments, it was established that the Alpha artifact is capable of converting electrical energy into a psi field. Its unique properties were used to power the X network and the Monolith installation. The scientific units of SIRCAA repeatedly tried to recreate the Alpha artifact by artificial synthesis on the artifact farm. All attempts ended in failure, which prompted SIRCAA scientists to conduct the second Caribbean experiment. The operation was disrupted due to the sabotage by stalkers from the S.T.A.L.K.E.R faction. Nevertheless, the experiment produced a second known Alpha artifact, confirming the possibility of its appearance in uncontrolled conditions. Case file materials number 45, from Dr. Dalin's personal notes.
I find myself thinking that doubts are not a scientist's weakness, but his only defense. Everyone talks about Skif as if he already holds the Alpha artifact in his hands. Stalker rumors are a kind of proof, but legends don't bring artifacts. People bring them, and people are wrong. How did he get the idea that he was looking for the Alpha? Skif is undoubtedly capable. However, the Alpha artifact is not another trophy from the zone. It is not lying around waiting to be picked up. I am worried about something else. Will Skif be able to recognize the moment when he needs to do the right thing? Will someone suddenly decide to lure him with better conditions? I do not rule out such a possibility. If anyone is capable of bringing the Alpha, it is precisely the one who does not fully understand what he is carrying.
SIRCAA Archive, section SC2692. The Thunderberry is one of the most famous and mythologized artifacts of electrical nature. Its rarity and ability to significantly increase the endurance of its carrier have given the artifact legendary status among stalkers. Without appropriate protection, possession of the artifact is extremely dangerous due to its strong radioactivity. An interesting feature, when heated above 78 degrees Celsius, it provokes group hallucinations of the utopian type. Case file materials number 46, taken from a stalker's PDA.
We then camped for 2 nights between the cowsheds at the cordon. The place seemed quiet. There were few anomalies. The radiation was within the permissible limits. They lit a fire, set up a kettle. Someone took out some canned food. I threw my backpack close to the fire without thinking. I was so tired that it didn't matter where anything lay. Only later did I realize what a fool I had been. At first everything was usual, only the fire burned somehow too evenly, without cracking, as if someone had adjusted it. We started talking, calmly, without swearing, without tension. Unusual. And then I felt that I was fine. Like, really fine. Like I hadn't been in a long time. The zone began to change before my eyes. It was as if someone had rebuilt the cowsheds. The walls were painted. The lights were turned on. I saw stalkers along the road without weapons, laughing, greeting each other, as if there had never been fear here. One of the guys said he could hear music, and I heard it too. Quiet, familiar, as if from childhood. We were brought back to our senses by a sharp crack. The backpack burst into shreds. Only now did I remember that the Thunderberry had been inside of it, which had been heated by the fire. I'd heard from other stalkers that this happens if the artifact is heated too much, but this is the first time I had seen it myself.
SIRCAA Archive, section CN4552. The compass is highly valued among stalkers due to its ability to create a gravitational field that can slow down or deflect bullets and debris, which significantly improves the protection of its owner. Without proper protection, possession of the artifact is extremely dangerous due to its strong radioactivity. It is widely believed among stalkers that this artifact helps find a way out of spatial anomalies. Case file materials number 47, from the story of a mercenary at the 100 Rads bar.
It wasn't my group that disappeared then, but I heard them on the radio. It was back in 2011. They climbed into the spatial anomaly, deciding there was a temporary survey. You walk for hours, but you return to the same lump of concrete from where you started. Time passes at least. For some, the hour dragged on like an eternity. For others, the night disappeared without sleep. Supplies melted, and with them hope. The radio held on by a miracle. I steadily monitored their waves, and then suddenly the calm voice of a stalker appeared on that frequency. He did not come after them. He said, "I will not come in, but listen carefully." As I later understood, he had a compass. He did not see them, but he felt the anomaly. He corrected their steps. Sometimes it seemed that it was someone else next to him who gave instructions. When they left, the connection was lost. They never saw the stalker, but everyone left alive. After that, I began to treat stalkers differently, with their occasional games of nobility.
SIRCAA Archive, section SC3442. The weird flower is one of the modified objects of the zone. The chances of finding a weird flower are extremely low. Few people manage not to fall asleep under the influence of the anomalous poppy field. The aroma of the flower is able to hide its bearer from the sharp smell of predators, but it fades over time. In order for the aroma to regain its strength, you need to go to bed with the flower on your belt. Case file materials number 48, from the story of the stalker Moryashko.
Once I went to the poppy field in search of an artifact. And yes, I went, although I knew that it was stupid. But what does the zone not joke about, eh? Why not try? The field was beautiful, to the point of hurting the eyes. Red, even, as if someone spilled red paint on the field. Then it bloomed. The air there was heavy, vicious. Took a few steps and immediately felt my legs filled with lead. And my thoughts became slow and sticky. Fatigue came over me, not abruptly, but gently. It was as if someone had put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Sit down and rest, you deserve it." I stopped, almost falling to my knees. It was a good thing that Morpha had advised me to stock up on energy drinks before the trip. I downed a full can, not even feeling the taste. My heart beat faster, but the sleepiness didn't go away. It just moved back a little. Then I heard voices. At first quiet, almost pleasant. Someone was laughing, like old friends by the fire. They convinced me that the artifact was already nearby. I just had to lie down and give my eyes a rest. Then the voices came closer, more intrusive. One whispered that he was also looking for a flower, but in vain. Another was arguing, shouting that I had stolen his sleep and that I should return it. The poppies were swaying and the wind was tearing petals off, carrying them over the field. At some point, all the voices merged into one deep, warm voice that promised me silence. I almost agreed, but I went out. I left the field. I got out by a miracle. When I looked back, the field was silent. You know, I still sometimes hear that voice when I get very tired, and I'm afraid that if one day it calls again, I'll answer. And there are no artifacts there. You don't have to go.